Miss Suk Wang lost her mother when she was just a little girl.
It's hard on anybody not having a mom to rely on.
But when Miss Suk married, her mother-in-law filled the void.
She really looked to Linda as her mom.
Linda thought of Miss Suk as her daughter.
They were really close.
But then Linda mysteriously disappeared.
I had a bad feeling something happened to her.
It was unlike her not to answer her phone.
Miss Suk appeared as worried as anyone.
Miss Suk said that she had been trying to contact her all day as well. I could tell that my mom was hurting.
But would a stunning piece of evidence reveal a deadly betrayal?
You can see the shock and surprise on Linda's face.
Crest Hill, Illinois, September 5th, 2011. It was around 8 o'clock that Monday evening when Larry Tida phoned the police in this quiet bedroom community of 20,000, an hour southwest of Chicago.
It is very safe. I wouldn't think twice about raising a family here.
Usually. But Larry was calling that night to report that his wife Linda, a 70-year-old Chinese immigrant, was missing.
She worked as an interpreter for a number of businesses up in Chicago.
She also worked as an advocate, assisting new immigrants in almost any way she could.
She would help Asian immigrants in securing loans and getting English classes, starting businesses, and generally realizing their dream of America.
And according to her husband, she'd left home before dawn that morning to drive a new client into Chicago's Chinatown.
She would do this routinely for other Asian American immigrants.
She gave me a kiss on the cheek and said, "I'll see you in a little while."
She was supposed to be home back with Larry later that morning.
Linda was supposed to be back by 11 a.m., but as morning turned to afternoon and his wife hadn't returned, Larry began to worry.
About every hour on the hour, I was phone calling her and leaving messages to call me.
But she never returned any of his calls.
He said it was unlike her not to answer her phone, not to get in contact with him and let him know why she was running late.
And by 8 that night, with still no word from Linda, her husband had called the police.
I just couldn't take no more.
Larry's going out of his mind at this point in time.
Was he simply overreacting?
The vast majority of time a missing persons report comes back, the person's safe sound.
Or had something happened to the 70-year-old grandmother?
I had a bad feeling.
Linda's husband didn't appear to be alone in his fear either. In the days ahead, her son and her daughter-in-law, 45-year-old Miss Suk Wang, would all join in the frantic search for the missing grandmother. Although she'd married into a Chinese-American family, Miss Suk's story started in South Korea. Born in 1965, Miss Suk's mother died when she was just a baby.
It's hard on anybody that would have to go through that, not having a mom to rely on.
And with her father unable to take care of her, Miss Suk was sent to live with relatives.
They didn't treat her very nicely. In fact, treated her more as a servant.
Her upbringing wasn't the best. The black sheep is what she really basically felt like.
Luckily, Miss Suk's Cinderella story came complete with a Prince Charming, an American GI named Andy Nowlin, who met the 22-year-old in 1987 while serving in Korea.
She was a very kind person. She had a very good heart. That was, one of the reasons why I fell in love with her.
And in 1988, after Andy left the Army and returned home to Illinois, Miss Suk followed.
She was here a few months and then we got married.
Soon after, Miss Suk was pregnant, and in 1989, the couple had a daughter.
I stayed at home with my mom. Her main focus was to take care of me.
Money was tight for the young family, at least in Miss Suk's mind.
Money was always a key factor in their conversation. If somebody else has got this car, why don't we have that car?
And eventually, those conversations about money became arguments.
I was working 2 full-time jobs, working 80 hours a week, and it still wasn't enough.
And by 1998, after 10 years of marriage, the couple had divorced.
She was just so money hungry.
She wanted to give me the best of the best, to give the life that she did not have.
To support herself and her daughter after the divorce, Misuk took a translating job at a local call center.
My mom was bilingual. She would talk to the Korean customers.
And soon after starting work at the call center, Misuk met a man who appeared to offer everything the struggling young mother wanted for her family. The son of Chinese immigrants, Don Wang was working at the call center to put himself through college.
He was always going to school. Don was trying to get his PhD.
And despite the fact that Don was Chinese and Misuk Korean, they started dating.
The two cultures don't always mingle, but in Don and Misuk's case, they did.
Their marriage in 2003 was a celebration of both their cultures.
It was different mixes of Chinese and Korean people, and it was a great time. It was a beautiful wedding.
But when Misuk said, "I do," she wasn't just marrying Don. She was joining his tight-knit family, led by its matriarch, Linda. Born in 1941, Linda had spent more than 20 years in the Chicago area. And by 2003, the 62-year-old was a prominent member of Chicago's Chinese community.
Linda was very well known in that community.
She'd spent years working as an interpreter for various businesses in the greater Chicago area.
She also worked as an interpreter with the federal government in the federal prison.
And she also worked with individual immigrants, helping them secure visas, housing, and jobs.
Assisting individuals that came into this country in any way that she could.
But as much as she enjoyed helping her fellow immigrants, Linda's priority was her only son, Don.
Don and his mother had a very, very, very close, relationship.
One that became even closer after Linda divorced Don's father.
They called each other 4 or 5 times every day, 7 days a week.
Don provided moral support for his mother after the divorce. In return, she helped support him while he pursued his PhD.
Don got a lot of his money from his mother.
And once he married Misuk, Linda would gladly help support her, too.
Linda thought of Misuk as her daughter.
Misuk felt the same way, too.
Since my mom didn't have that mother figure growing up, she really looked to Linda as her mom. They were really close.
And at times, they seemed more like BFFs than mother and daughter.
They would go to Chicago and go to the spas together all the time. They would also go to Peoria on the riverboat. They would go to the casino.
In fact, thanks to her mother-in-law's generosity, Misuk finally had the lifestyle that she had always wanted.
She drove a Mercedes-Benz. She always wanted the latest fashions, latest clothes, latest designers.
She was very attractive. She always made herself up. She always had makeup on and looked nice.
Linda even gave Misuk the money to open her own sewing and alterations business.
My mom's always really good at, putting things together, sewing-wise, fixing my shirts for me growing up. So she decided to get a little shop in Bloomington, and she was really excited about it.
And in 2006, Misuk repaid Linda's kindness with the gift her mother-in-law wanted most, a grandson.
There's no doubt that deepened the relationship between Misuk and Linda.
And 4 years later, Misuk's mother-in-law had her own happy news. At the age of 69, and after years on her own, Linda had found love.
We met on Match.com, and I met her at a restaurant, and everything sort of clicked real nice.
Linda and Larry Tida married in January of 2011.
Linda and Larry wanted to live out the rest of their lives with each other, the rest of their golden years with each other.
But it wasn't meant to be. On September 5th, 2011, just 8 months after their wedding, Linda mysteriously vanished. Coming up, just who was Linda taking to Chinatown?
I think it was a setup.
Was it possible she'd been abducted?
Might have been one of the Chinese gangs.
At around 8 p.m. on September 5, 2011, Larry Tida called the Crest Hill, Illinois Police Department and filed a missing persons report. His wife, Linda, a business consultant and interpreter who worked with the Chinese immigrant community, had left home before dawn that morning to pick up a client in Bloomington and drive them to Chicago.
Which wasn't unusual. She did this sort of things often.
She was going to be back by between 8 and 9 for us to have breakfast.
But the 70-year-old hadn't come home, and she hadn't returned any of her husband's increasingly worried calls either.
I started calling her on the hour, every hour, and I got no response, no answer, no phone call.
So at a little before 8, Larry had made another call to the police.
I had this bad feeling something had happened.
It was only a gut feeling, but it was enough to convince Larry.
She didn't contact anybody, and all of a sudden she's just gone. Nobody can get a hold of her.
So that's got to be very scary for the family.
Hoping to find a lead on Linda's whereabouts, the investigators pulled her phone records.
Our first thing is to look at phone records. This day and age, everybody's tied to their cell phones.
But when the investigators looked at Linda's phone records, they made a surprising discovery.
The last bounce off a cell phone tower from Linda's cell phone came from a tower here in Bloomington.
We literally can track from tower to tower all the way to Bloomington, Illinois.
So as far as we knew, that was the last place she was.
An hour and a half south of Crest Hill, Bloomington had been Linda's first stop that morning.
She had a client that she was supposed to come down here and pick up to take that client back to Chicago.
Had the meetup occurred, could it have something to do with Linda's disappearance?
This is not out of the realm of possibility.
However, when the investigators tried to track down the mysterious client, they quickly ran into trouble. Larry could only provide the sketchiest details.
She was a Chinese immigrant and needed a ride to Chinatown in Chicago.
And Linda's phone records were little help either, although there was one number on her log of incoming calls that the investigators found suspicious, one from a New York area code.
I had tried to contact it, and it always went to voicemail.
With the phone number a dead end, the missing persons investigators hit the streets.
The investigation at this phase goes into talking to everyone she knows in Bloomington.
Linda had friends here in the community that operated a number of the Chinese restaurants here in Bloomington. They went to several of the restaurants, but nobody had any contact with her. Nobody knew anything about where Linda had gone or who she might have met with.
They also tried to contact Linda's son, Don, and his wife, 45-year-old Miss Wang, who lived in Bloomington.
They made contact with Miss that evening.
Miss told the investigators that her husband was out of town on a trip to California. She also said that she hadn't heard anything from Linda all day, which was strange.
Miss said that she had been trying to contact her all day as well.
And when the investigators asked what she thought had happened to her mother-in-law, Miss raised a chilling possibility.
Miss made an indication that it might have been one of the Chinese gangs.
According to Miss her mother-in-law's work with the federal prison system meant she'd occasionally translated for gang members.
She worked as an interpreter for Chinese nationals that were in custody.
Was it possible one of the inmates Linda worked with had criminal contacts on the outside? Contacts who might abduct the successful businesswoman.
I didn't know what was going on, that if somebody had her, that if it was for money or whatever.
And Larry's fear only deepened as 2 days passed with no word or sign of Linda.
You don't sleep too much when you don't know what's going on or what's happened.
Linda's husband Larry and her daughter-in-law Miss weren't the only ones that appeared to be worried sick over the 70-year-old's disappearance. There was also Linda's assistant in her interpreting and consulting business, a Chinese immigrant named Jenny.
I actually reached out to Jenny when I got the cell phone records to see if she had any other information that she could provide. She was kind of Linda's right hand.
Unfortunately, Linda's right hand told the investigators she had no idea what had become of her boss.
Jenny seemed generally concerned about what had happened to Linda and where she was.
Hours, even the police were starting to fear the worst.
My gut instinct is something bad's going on here. This isn't just a missing.
But if it was a kidnapping, why hadn't anyone contacted the family for ransom? Don didn't know for sure, but he agreed with the investigators that the mysterious New York number that showed up in Linda's phone records might be the key to finding out who had set her up.
90% of the clients, they mostly from New York, their cell phone number start with 917, which is New York number.
After Don's interview, the investigators tried the New York number again, and this time it didn't go to voicemail.
It was disconnected.
Was Don on to something? Was the New York number connected to his mother's disappearance? The investigators thought so.
I had the FBI try and look it up.
But before the FBI was able to track down the number, a stunning break would lead the search for Miss Suk Wang's mother-in-law in a surprising new direction. Coming up, the investigators recover a crucial piece of video.
You can see the shock and surprise on Linda's face.
But the real shock is who else gets caught on tape.
You can see Linda backing away from her.
By September 12, 2011, it had been a week since 70-year-old Linda Tida had disappeared in Bloomington, Illinois.
The last known ping from a cell tower is here in Bloomington, and that's when the investigation and search for Linda begins.
Linda's daughter-in-law, 45-year-old Miss Suk Wang, told investigators that she worried that her mother-in-law had been abducted or robbed. But on September 12th, a stunning new lead would turn the investigation into Linda Tida's disappearance in a shocking new direction. The break came from Bloomington's Chinese community.
And the close-knit Asian American community here in Bloomington becomes aware that Linda's missing. That leaks throughout the entire community.
And one of the people that heard the news was a waitress at a local Chinese restaurant. A waitress who had a strange story for the police.
She comes forward about a weird thing that she had done on another person's behalf.
According to the waitress, the weird thing had started when a well-dressed woman she'd never seen before approached her at work on September 4th, the day before Linda disappeared.
She went in there and asked the hostess specifically if they spoke Chinese.
And when the waitress said that she spoke Chinese, the mystery woman had asked her for a favor.
She asked her to make a phone call for her.
A phone call to Linda.
She told her to tell Linda that she needed a ride to Chicago. She would pay $500 for this ride. Linda accepted.
She'd actually been set up in a ruse of sorts.
And just who was this mystery woman who'd set Linda up? The waitress couldn't tell the police, but the restaurant's security cameras could.
The officers pulled the surveillance video, and you can clearly see Ms. Suk going into the restaurant.
But if Linda had been set up by her daughter-in-law, what had she set her up for? All the waitress knew was that Ms. Suk wanted Linda to meet her at a local Bloomington grocery store. And when the investigators pulled the security footage from that store, they made another stunning discovery.
Linda pulls into the parking lot, stops under one of the light poles, and further back in the parking lot, you see a pair of headlights come on, and you see the headlights drive around the parking lot and come in and pull in next to Linda's vehicle.
The car that pulled in next to Linda was Miss Suk's Mercedes.
Miss Suk had laid in wait for Linda.
On the video, both women got out of their cars, and Miss Suk started screaming at her mother-in-law.
You can see the shock and surprise on Linda's face.
You can see Linda backing away from her.
Linda was trying to leave, but Ms. Suk would grab her by the arm, grab her by her purse, grab her by her shirt.
And then, just as it appeared the argument was on the verge of turning violent, it was suddenly over.
It ends with the two women going back into their respective vehicles and driving away.
What was the confrontation about? And did it have anything to do with Linda's disappearance? On the evening of September 12th, the investigators brought Miss Suk in for questioning.
As we're talking, I said, so when was it exactly the last time you saw her? And she says, well, I went to their house, and I want to say it was like September 1st.
Which was 4 days before the parking lot confrontation.
Why would she not be truthful about having a conversation with Linda Tida in the parking lot?
She wanted to play the play dumb routine. Like, I don't know anything about anything.
Miss Suk could deny it all she wanted, but the police had her on tape. In fact, that wasn't all they had. While Miss Suk was talking to the detectives, crime scene investigators were busy searching her home in Bloomington and her alteration shop, the business her mother-in-law had helped finance.
We have the search warrants. We want to make sure Ms. Suk isn't around when we execute him.
And in the dumpster behind Miss Suk's shop, the detectives found something.
I found a lot of ID cards and credit cards that were cut up into small pieces.
But while the cards had all been cut up, the investigators were still able to read them.
I was still able to make out the name of our missing person, Linda Tida.
And that wasn't all they found either.
A shirt was found in the dumpster with some blood on it.
Crime scene investigators immediately conveyed that information back to the detectives questioning Miss Suk. And the result was a dramatic shift in Miss Suk's interrogation.
Now my job is to get Ms. Suk to tell me what happened. And whether I believe that's what happened, it doesn't matter. I just need her to start talking about it.
And once the investigators confronted her with what they knew, the video, the cut-up IDs, and the blood, Miss Suk finally began to talk. According to Miss Suk, she would never do anything to hurt her mother-in-law.
Linda and Masuk's relationship was great in the beginning. Masuk thought of her as the mother she never had.
In fact, she told the investigators that she truly loved Linda.
She would even call her mom.
And Miss Suk said she'd done everything she could to make Mom happy.
In the Asian culture, you want to please your mom and your family, and it's really important.
However, according to Miss Suk, something had eventually come between them, her marriage to Linda's son, Don.
I could just see that their marriage wasn't the greatest. I could tell that my mom was hurting.
And Miss Suk said she was hurting because she suspected Don was cheating.
Masuk believed that her husband was having an affair.
And it wasn't just some casual hookup either. Miss Suk suspected that her husband was having an affair with Linda's assistant, Jenny.
It was devastating on my mom. She had no idea that this was going on at all. Jenny and my mom had known each other for a really long time.
And Miss Suk said that Linda's attitude about the alleged affair was just as devastating.
Masuk believed that she knew about it and was almost happy about it.
And the idea that her mother-in-law supported the alleged affair hurt Miss Suk deeply.
Miss Suk had been abandoned by both Don and Linda. I think this took a heavy, heavy toll on her.
But she also said that she was determined to fight.
My mom didn't want to give up on their marriage. She didn't want to have another divorce.
And Miss Suk said she had arranged the parking lot meeting as a last-ditch attempt to enlist her mother-in-law's support.
She was actually trying to possibly talk to Linda and trying to get her to see her point of view. I need you to help me get my husband back.
But Miss Suk said that the meeting had quickly turned angry.
Miss Suk, she had a temper. Linda had a temper as well.
She didn't want to talk to my mom. She didn't want to have anything to do with her.
But if the argument had ended with Miss Suk and her mother-in-law each driving away, how did Linda's ID and credit cards end up in the dumpster outside the sewing shop?
Linda chose to follow Miss Suk back to the sewing shop.
Miss Suk told the police that once they arrived at the shop, a second angry confrontation occurred on the sidewalk outside. And according to Miss Suk, her mother-in-law had turned violent.
Linda started it.
Just started hitting my mom and just started hitting her in the temple and the head.
Miss Suk told the police that she and Linda had soon tumbled to the pavement.
Miss Suk said Linda was on her back, reached up, choking Miss Suk.
And Miss Suk, desperately trying to break free, had done what she could to fight back.
Miss Suk was on top of her, choking Linda.
My mom at that point just felt like this lady is trying to kill me.
But Miss Suk said that in their struggle to the death, her 70-year-old mother-in-law had succumbed first.
The next thing she knows, she was dead.
Miss Suk said she'd tried to save Linda, a claim she repeated later that night when the investigators took her to the sewing shop and asked her to walk through what happened.
I tried to mask them out.
You tried to mask them out?
It's just no way goes.
And once she realized that her mother-in-law truly was dead, Miss Suk said she'd hidden the body in the sewing shop overnight.
She puts her behind some clothing and furniture and stuff like that to keep her body hidden.
And the next night, according to Miss Suk, she buried Linda's body in a nature preserve on the outskirts of Chicago.
She drove for hours all over to find the perfect spot to bury her.
A spot that she led the investigators to early on the morning of September 13th.
She didn't want to come very close to it. In fact, maybe 20, 25 feet is the closest she would get to it.
She didn't want to be confronted again with the terrible act that she'd committed.
But she would have to confront it again in a court of law. Because despite her claims of self-defense, by the time the medical examiner's office had finished exhuming her mother-in-law's body, Miss Suk was back in Bloomington and under arrest for murder.
I was shocked when I found out that Miss Suk was charged with murdering Linda. Very shocked.
There's just no way my mom's not capable of doing that.
Coming up, will the trial reveal Miss Sook's sinister motive?
Linda had a life insurance policy.
Or will a shocking new twist suggest that she's telling the truth?
Misook would not just murder his grandmother in front of him.
On December 10, 2012, Misook Wang stood trial for murder in Bloomington, Illinois. Arrested in 2011, the 47-year-old mother of two was charged with the murder of her 70-year-old mother-in-law, Linda Tida, a translator and advocate for Chicago's Chinese community.
The community was horrified by what happened to Linda.
Although no one was more shocked than Larry Tida, who'd been Linda's husband for a mere 8 months.
I never thought Misook would ever do anything to Linda like that. I thought they were friends.
But Miss Sook had done it. In fact, she had basically confessed to the police.
After hours of talking, she admitted to murdering her mother-in-law.
Although, in Miss Sook's version of events, it wasn't murder, it was self-defense.
In her opinion, they were mutual combatants.
A fight that Miss Sook said began as a violent argument over her husband's alleged affair.
I think Miss Sook was upset, extremely upset, but extremely angry that Linda wouldn't take her side in this supposed extramarital affair.
But was that really what happened? In their opening statement, the prosecution said it was true that a divorce had been in Don and Miss Sook's future.
Don was going to divorce Misook. Probably he was going to file for the divorce when he returned from his trip from California.
And according to the prosecution, it wasn't over Don's so-called affair with his mother's assistant, Jenny.
When talking with Don and Jenny, it was just a friendship, platonic friendship, no sort of physical aspect to it whatsoever, or romantic aspect.
But if Don wasn't leaving Miss Sook for Jenny, why get divorced? To explain, the prosecutors put Don on the stand, and he told the jury that the marriage had initially been a good one.
From the beginning, it seemed like they were a happy family.
But Don testified that they became less happy with each passing year.
Miss Sook's lust for material gain and for wealth started to consume the marriage. She liked wealth. She liked nice clothes. She liked nice cars.
She always wanted this. She always wanted that. She needed more of everything.
Miss Sook also wanted people to know that she had money.
Even if that wasn't technically true.
She was just charging everything on her credit cards. So it created a lot of debt with opening new credit cards up and maxing them out.
Don said that Miss Sook's spending soon led to trouble.
She had a more extravagant lifestyle than I think Don liked, and I think they did have quite a bit of disputes about money.
Her materialism, her wanting of wealth, and the fights they were having about money put a strain on the relationship.
In fact, Don claimed that Miss Sook's materialism eventually pushed the marriage to the breaking point.
Miss Sook had a penchant to steal things.
She got arrested for her shoplifting a month or two before the murder.
Don testified that he and his mother had been embarrassed by the arrest.
They refused to post bond for.
Don said that Miss Sook had been furious, so mad that when she did get out, she'd gone to the bank and cleaned out the couple's joint checking account.
She basically raided the checking account for thousands of dollars.
Don testified that the theft had been the final push he needed to file for divorce. And the prosecution believed the missing money would also play a crucial role in his mother's murder. According to the prosecution, the key pieces of evidence were a series of jailhouse letters Miss Sook wrote to her daughter and several Korean friends while she was awaiting trial.
All of her correspondence was in Korean, and I think she felt that we would not be able to know what she was saying because she was saying it in Korean.
But she was wrong.
We had an assistant in our office who was Korean.
And the prosecutors claimed that those letters, translations of which were provided to the jury, revealed the true motive behind Linda's murder.
In her letters, Ms. Suk spoke about the fact that Linda had a life insurance policy that Don was the beneficiary of.
If something happened to Linda, Don would get all this money.
But not all of it.
Ms. Suk believed that if Linda died, she would be entitled to at least half of that life insurance policy in a divorce settlement.
And the result was a murder plot, according to the prosecutors.
It was not something that just happened spontaneously. It was not something that was an accident.
She was willing to do whatever it took to make sure that she was financially set.
And on September 4th, she'd asked the waitress to place the call that set up the ambush.
Mizook had paid her $20.
But according to the prosecutors, the real bait was the money Ms. Suk stole from Dawn's checking account.
A lot of the money that was put into that checking account was from Linda.
The prosecutors claimed that was how Ms. Suk was able to lure Linda from the grocery store parking lot to the sewing shop where the murder occurred.
Linda was following her because she promised to pay Linda the money that she owed her that she had taken out of the checking account.
And Ms. Suk's claim of self-defense? The prosecution countered that by putting the medical examiner on the stand, who testified that in order to kill Linda, Ms. Suk would have to keep strangling her mother-in-law long after the 70-year-old had gone unconscious.
The threat would have been over with, and yet Mizook continued to choke Linda Tida to her death.
Self-defense ends when someone can't fight back anymore.
But according to the prosecutors, the most chilling thing about the murder was the fact that Ms. Suk didn't commit the crime alone.
Her poor 5-year-old son was with her the whole time.
He's sitting in the car, and I can't imagine what was going through his head.
Would that sickening revelation turn the jury against her?
I don't know how a person allows their child to witness such a violent act against the child's grandmother.
Or would it strengthen Ms. Suk's claim that the crime wasn't premeditated, that she'd killed Linda in self-defense?
Mizook would not just murder his grandmother in front of him.
And to prove that Ms. Suk wasn't the monster that the prosecutors made her out to be, the defense called her to the stand on December 17th.
If anybody was in her situation, they would want their voice to be heard.
Through tears, Ms. Suk admitted to luring Linda to the parking lot. But she also claimed that murder wasn't what she'd had in mind.
She said, I just wanted to talk to her and say I'm sorry.
Ms. Suk said that she'd been shocked by what happened next.
When she got to the sewing shop, according to Ms. Suk, that's when Linda attacked her.
It was just a fight that went wrong and resulted in Linda's death.
And according to Ms. Suk, she'd had no choice.
She felt like this was a life or death situation.
But if that was true, why not call the police afterwards? Ms. Suk claimed that she feared losing her 5-year-old son.
She didn't know what was going to happen with him. Will I ever get to see him again?
It was emotional and powerful testimony.
Just sitting there, I felt so helpless for my mom. I felt so bad for her.
But would the jury share her daughter's sympathy? Coming up, will Ms. Suk go to prison?
Whatever she got, she deserved.
Or will she go free?
It really came down to just one thing, and one thing only.
On December 18, 2012, the jury in Ms. Suk Wang's murder trial announced that it had reached a verdict. The 47-year-old mother of 2 was charged with first-degree murder, accused of strangling her mother-in-law, 70-year-old Linda Tida.
The evidence really was overwhelming and really came down to just one thing, and one thing only. Do you believe that Mizook was acting in self-defense or not?
On the stand, Mizook had tearfully made the case for self-defense.
She didn't do it out of spite. She didn't do it out of hate.
But the prosecutors claim that Mizook had been motivated by anger and greed.
Don was the sole beneficiary of his mom's insurance policy, and if their marriage ended up in divorce, she would be entitled to, in her opinion, 50% of it.
She gets revenge on the mother, she gets revenge on Don, and she gets the ability to be financially set and secure.
And now, after just 2.5 hours of deliberation, the jury had made its decision.
It didn't take the jury long, based upon the evidence that we had, to come back and return with a guilty verdict of first-degree murder.
Mizook broke down when the verdict was read.
Ms. Duke seemed very beside herself. That's what I thought. Like she had been through hell.
And her friends and family were just as surprised.
I wasn't thinking that she was going to get, first degree.
I think she should have been convicted of manslaughter.
At her sentencing hearing on March 1st, Mizook received a total of 55 years in prison.
Mizook was sentenced to 50 years for the murder and 5 years for burying the body.
And the fact that the 47-year-old had essentially been put away for the rest of her life suited Linda's grieving husband just fine.
She never apologized to me or anything like that, or said anything to me about she's sorry that she did it. I'd probably never forgive her for what she's done. Whatever she got, she deserved.
Mizook tore apart her family with this act.
Although even after the conviction, Mizook's daughter, who was 23 when her mother went to prison, continued to stand by her.
I need to be strong for her and to keep her going and to help her out and just get her through day to day.
Because she remains convinced that her mother killed Linda in self-defense.
The only side that people ever saw of her is that she hurt the people that was closest to her. And I just hope that people can see her side and realize that, she's a good person. She's got a caring heart.
Oregon 1988 cold case solved. Forgotten fingerprint. Exposes killer after 38 years. The following story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real people, places, investigations, or events is purely coincidental. Silence has a sound. It lingers in abandoned houses, settles over empty highways, and clings to forgotten evidence sealed inside cardboard boxes that nobody expects to open again. Detectives often say every crime scene leaves something behind. A footprint, a fiber, a fingerprint, a mistake. Most disappear beneath dust and time. A few survive, waiting decades for someone willing to look one more time. October 1988 arrived in western Oregon wrapped in relentless rain. Thick clouds swallowed the mountains before sunrise. The forest dripped with cold mist. Every winding road seemed to vanish into darkness long before evening. Residents of the small logging community outside Blackridge had lived with that weather their entire lives. They locked their doors without thinking. They knew every truck passing through town. They recognized every face in the grocery store. Nothing extraordinary ever happened there until one Friday night. At 9:17 p.m., the dispatcher received a call from a frightened teenager delivering newspapers. His voice trembled so violently that the operator asked him 3 times to repeat the address. He had seen the front door hanging open. Lights inside the farmhouse were still glowing. The family dog stood on the porch, barking without stopping. Deputies reached the property 12 minutes later. Rain washed across the gravel driveway. No tire track survived. No witnesses remained. Inside, dinner still sat on the kitchen table. 2 plates, coffee gone cold, a loaf of bread half-sliced. The radio whispered country music into empty rooms. Nothing appeared disturbed until investigators stepped into the hallway. There, they found 32-year-old school librarian Emily Carter lying beside the staircase. She had suffered a single fatal wound. No weapon, no signs of forced entry. No había estragos. Her purse remained untouched. Her wedding ring was still on her finger. Cash sat inside an envelope on the kitchen counter. Nothing made sense. Her husband, Daniel Carter, arrived nearly 20 minutes later after finishing the late shift at a nearby lumber mill. Deputies described him as pale, speechless, barely able to stand after seeing paramedics carry Emily from the house. He insisted he had left home shortly before 6. Emily had planned to spend the evening grading elementary school reading assignments. She rarely answered the door after dark. She trusted almost everyone. That detail would haunt investigators for decades, because whoever entered the farmhouse had not broken a window, had not kicked in the door, had not stolen anything. Emily had almost certainly opened the door willingly. Detectives searched every inch of the property through the night. Rain destroyed impressions in the mud before technicians could photograph them. Streams overflowing behind the house erased anything that might have remained. Search dogs followed a scent less than 200 yards before losing it completely along the county road. The killer had vanished. Morning newspapers carried a headline no one in Blackridge expected to read. Local librarian found murdered. Within hours, volunteers organized neighborhood searches. Church groups prepared meals for investigators. Hunters combed logging roads. High school students distributed flyers despite having no suspect to identify. Everyone believed the answer would appear within days. Instead, every new interview deepened the mystery. Emily had no known enemies, no financial disputes, no history of violence, no threatening letters. Parents describe her as endlessly patient. Children remember her by the bookmarks she handed out every Friday. Elderly neighbors said she shoveled snow from their driveways every winter without being asked. Who would want her dead? Investigators built timelines so detailed they measured events in minutes. At 5:42 p.m., Emily checked out 2 books to a retired teacher. At 5:58, she stopped at Miller's grocery for milk. At 6:11, a cashier remembered seeing her smile while paying with exact change. At 6:26, another customer noticed her loading groceries into her station wagon. At 6:41, a neighbor saw smoke rising from the Carter chimney. At 7:08, someone called the house. No answer. No recording existed. No telephone company retained enough information to identify the caller. That anonymous call became the first unanswered question. It would not be the last. State police joined the investigation before sunrise the next day. Detectives photographed every surface inside the farmhouse, collecting hundreds of latent fingerprints from glassware, furniture, light switches, windows, and door frames. Most belonged to Emily or Daniel. Others belonged to relatives who had visited during the previous summer. One print refused to cooperate. It rested on the brass handle of the rear laundry room door. Only part of the ridge pattern remained visible, smudged, incomplete, too small for identification using the technology available in 1988. Evidence technicians preserved it anyway, a routine decision, one that almost nobody discussed again. As autumn faded into winter, attention shifted toward Daniel Carter. Statistics demanded it. Spouses often became the first suspects. Detectives questioned him repeatedly. His co-workers confirmed he had been working throughout the estimated time of death. Time cards matched. Machine logs matched. Multiple employees remembered speaking with him. His clothing revealed no blood. His vehicle contained nothing suspicious. Weeks became months. Daniel remained under suspicion in whispers, never in court. The community split quietly. Some believed investigators overlooked an obvious answer. Others believed the real killer had escaped before anyone even realized a crime had occurred. Meanwhile, another strange detail surfaced. 3 residents reported seeing an unfamiliar dark pickup truck parked near County Road 18 during the previous week. Descriptions varied. Older model, possible Ford, dark blue, maybe black. One witness thought it carried out-of-state plates. Another insisted it had Oregon registration. The driver remained nothing more than a silhouette behind rain-covered glass. No one recorded the license number. The truck disappeared into memory. Winter buried the roads beneath snow. Spring washed them clean again. Nothing new emerged. The case file expanded by inches every month. Interview transcripts, laboratory reports, photographs, maps, handwritten notes, boxes filled shelves. Hope slowly emptied from every conversation. Years passed. Families moved away. Businesses closed. Children who once visited Emily's library graduated, married, and raised children of their own. The farmhouse eventually stood empty. Windows boarded. Paint peeling. Grass swallowing the front steps. Teenagers invented ghost stories about the place. Drivers accelerated when passing after sunset. The murder became folklore before it became history. Detectives retired one after another. Each carried the same frustration. Every clue ended in silence. In 1998, a fresh review produced more than 40 new interviews. Nothing. In 2005, another task force examined preserved evidence using improved forensic techniques. Still nothing. DNA recovered from the scene proved too limited for comparison. Fibers matched common household materials. Hair samples lacked roots. The fingerprint remained incomplete. Always incomplete. Always waiting. The evidence box returned to storage. Dust settled once more. By then, Daniel Carter had left Oregon entirely. He never remarried. Friends said he rarely spoke about Emily after moving north. Every October, however, flowers appeared anonymously at her grave. No one ever confirmed who placed them there. The town continued living beneath the weight of unanswered questions. Parents warned children not to answer unexpected knocks after dark. Residents still remembered exactly where they had been the night Emily died. Some claimed they heard screams. Others admitted they remembered nothing at all. Memory became unreliable. Rumors became stronger than facts. Then came 2026. Nearly 4 decades after investigators photographed that faint mark on the brass door handle, Oregon's Cold Case Initiative launched a statewide review of unsolved homicides using advanced digital fingerprint reconstruction powered by modern imaging and ridge enhancement algorithms. Thousands of forgotten evidence envelopes returned from storage. Technicians reopened Emily Carter's box. Inside rested the same yellow evidence card, prepared 38 years earlier. Someone almost threw it away during an office relocation. Someone else noticed the case number. One final examination was approved. No one expected history to change. The scam began just after 8 on a Tuesday morning. High-resolution cameras captured microscopic ridge fragments invisible to the naked eye. Software removed decades of discoloration. Digital reconstruction filled gaps once considered unreadable. Lines emerged. Curves sharpened. Tiny characteristics hidden inside the damaged print suddenly became measurable. The fingerprint that had defeated generations of investigators slowly revealed itself. A forensic examiner leaned closer to the monitor. She stopped speaking. Another examiner walked across the laboratory. Nobody touched the keyboard. The automated comparison searched millions of archive prints collected across multiple states. Minutes felt like hours. Then a single notification appeared on the screen. Possible identification found. The room fell completely silent. The notification remained on the monitor for several long seconds. No one in the laboratory celebrated. Experienced examiners knew better than to trust a preliminary match. One false assumption had the power to destroy years of careful work. The fingerprint was processed again. Then again. Every ridge ending. Every bifurcation, every microscopic curve was compared against the archived record. The confidence score climbed higher with each verification. By noon, the impossible had become probable. The partial print recovered from the Carter farmhouse in 1988 appeared to belong to a man whose name had never surfaced during the original investigation. Leon Mercer, 69 years old, a retired commercial truck mechanic. No convictions. No record connecting him to Emily Carter. No relatives living anywhere near Black Ridge. The detectives assigned to Oregon's Cold Case Initiative stared at the file in disbelief. Mercer had spent decades living quietly in another state. His fingerprints had entered the national database only after a routine employment background check years earlier, long after Emily's murder had faded from public memory. There was only one problem. A fingerprint alone did not explain why he had been inside the farmhouse. The original evidence box came back onto the examination table. Technicians unfolded brittle reports typed on yellowing paper. Crime scene photographs were scanned again at modern resolution. Details that had been overlooked in 1988 suddenly became visible. A muddy boot print near the back porch measured larger than investigators originally estimated. A cigarette but recovered outside the fence had never produced usable DNA with the technology of its time. Tiny fibers trapped beneath a loose floorboard were preserved but never identified. Every forgotten detail seemed to whisper that the case had never truly been finished. Detectives built a complete timeline of Leon Mercer's life. In October 1988, he had been working temporary repair contracts throughout western Oregon. One invoice placed him less than 30 miles from Blackridge during the week Emily died. Another receipt showed he had purchased gasoline at a station only 15 minutes away. Neither document had existed in the original investigation. Businesses had digitized old accounting records years later, preserving information no detective in 1988 could have accessed. The discovery was enough to justify a quiet interview. Mercer answered the door with cautious eyes and a steady voice. Age had bent his shoulders, but not his memory. He admitted traveling through Oregon in the late 1980s. He admitted working on logging equipment. He admitted visiting dozens of rural properties whose names he no longer remembered. When asked about Emily Carter, his expression never changed. "I've never heard that name." The detectives watched carefully. No hesitation. No recibo de panique. Only calm denial. He voluntarily provided a fresh fingerprint sample. The laboratory comparison returned within hours. The match held. Mercer's right index finger was consistent with the latent print recovered from the rear laundry room door. Still, investigators needed context. A fingerprint could arrive innocently. Had he repaired something there? Delivered equipment? Stopped to ask for directions? The original homeowner records revealed no repair invoices and no known connection between Mercer and the Carter family. The mystery only deepened. Publicly, nothing was announced. Privately, the investigation accelerated. Retired detectives were called back for consultation. Old witnesses, those still living, were contacted again. Most remembered little after nearly 4 decades. A few recalled rumors they had dismissed at the time. One elderly resident mentioned seeing an unfamiliar pickup near the Carter property during heavy rain. Another remembered a stranger asking about back roads leading toward the logging camps. None of it proved murder. But for the first time in decades, the silence surrounding the case had begun to crack. Across Blackridge, people noticed investigators returning to places long abandoned. Yellow evidence markers appeared around the old farmhouse once again. News spread faster than any official statement. Coffee shops buzzed with speculation. Families who had spent years avoiding the subject suddenly found themselves talking about October 1988 all over again. The case that everyone believed was buried had come back to life. And somewhere inside thousands of pages of forgotten paperwork, detectives believed the final answer was still waiting. The renewed investigation moved with a different rhythm than it had in 1988. Back then, detectives had chased people. Now they chased data. Every forgotten receipt, every archive property record, every payroll ledger, every faded photograph became a witness that time could no longer silence. Boxes that had remained untouched for decades were reopened under bright laboratory lights. Paper crackled as investigators unfolded interview notes written by detectives who had long since retired or passed away. Margins filled with hurried observations suddenly carried new meaning. A sentence ignored 38 years earlier could now redirect an entire investigation. One line stood out. Neighbor reported hearing truck engine approximately 9 p.m., unable to determine direction of travel. It was buried halfway through a supplemental report. No one had followed it further. The witness had been 82 years old in 1988. Investigators at the time believed his hearing was unreliable. His statement had been filed away with dozens of others. Today, technology approached the problem differently. Traffic engineers reconstructed the road network as it existed in October 1988. Logging companies provided historical maps showing which routes remained open during heavy rain. Weather archives confirmed that flooding had closed 2 bridges at evening, forcing every vehicle leaving the Carter farmhouse to travel along a single narrow county road before reaching the highway. If the witness truly heard a truck around 9 o'clock, there had been only one practical escape route. Detectives drove that road themselves. The forest had changed little. Towering Douglas firs still blocked most of the moonlight. Sharp curves appeared with almost no warning. Even during daylight, the road felt isolated. At night, it became a tunnel of darkness where headlights disappeared behind walls of mist. Halfway along the route, investigators noticed something missing from every original report: an abandoned service station. The building had collapsed years earlier and was now hidden beneath thick vegetation. But county property records confirmed it had still been standing in 1988. One retired deputy remembered it immediately. "Truckers stop there all the time," he said. "Coffee, cigarettes, directions." The statement prompted another search through archived business licenses. The owner had died years earlier. His daughter still possessed several storage boxes rescued before the building was demolished. Inside one of them sat old maintenance logs, fuel invoices, and a faded guest notebook where regular customers occasionally signed their names while waiting for repairs. Most entries had become illegible. One remained surprisingly clear: Leon Mercer, October 13, 1988, the day before Emily Carter was killed. The notebook alone proved nothing. Mercer had already admitted traveling through Oregon during that period. Still, investigators now knew with certainty that he had been in Blackridge immediately before the murder. The timeline narrowed. Attention shifted toward Mercer's pickup. Department of Motor Vehicles archives revealed he had owned a dark blue Ford F-250 during the late 1980s. The description matched the uncertain memories collected from multiple witnesses decades earlier. Not perfectly, but closely enough to justify another interview. This time detectives brought in large crime scene photographs. Mercer studied each image without visible emotion. He admitted recognizing the old farmhouse. Then, for the first time, his story changed. He claimed he had knocked on the door, looking for directions to a logging site. No one answered. He walked around the side of the house before leaving. That explanation immediately raised new questions. His fingerprint had been recovered from the inside handle of the rear laundry room door, not the outside. Investigators asked him to explain. Mercer remained silent for nearly 30 seconds. "I don't remember." The interview ended shortly afterward. Outside the station, detectives exchanged brief glances. After 38 years, memory naturally faded. But changing stories rarely happen by accident. Search warrants followed within days. Mercer's storage garage contained dozens of carefully labeled boxes filled with tools collected over a lifetime repairing heavy equipment. Nothing immediately connected him to Emily Carter. No weapon, no diary, no photographs, no traufis. Just ordinary objects belonging to an ordinary man. Then a forensic technician opened a rusted steel toolbox hidden beneath a workbench. Inside lay dozens of old keys. House keys, padlock keys, vehicle keys. Each carried a small handwritten paper tag identifying where it had come from. Most labels referred to demolished mills or abandoned job sites. One tag had no location, only a date, October 1988. No explanation, no address, no inicials, just a month and a year. The key itself fit no lock investigators immediately recognized. It was sealed into evidence. Back in Blackridge, Emily Carter's younger sister watched every development unfold through local news broadcasts. For decades, she had lived with questions no detective could answer. Now reporters camped outside her home, asking whether justice had finally arrived. She refused every interview. Instead, she visited the cemetery alone one rainy afternoon. Fresh flowers rested beside Emily's headstone. No card, no name, only white lilies. The groundskeeper insisted no visitor had been seen entering that morning. It was another mystery layered upon countless others. As autumn rain returned to western Oregon, Blackridge found itself reliving the darkest chapter in its history. Old newspaper clippings reappeared in storefront windows. Retired investigators gathered at diners comparing forgotten memories. People who had remained silent for decades suddenly questioned whether they had overlooked something important all those years ago. The case was no longer a fading legend. It had become an active investigation once again. And somewhere between a fingerprint, a weathered notebook, a changing story, and an unlabeled key, detectives believed the final truth was drawing closer than it ever had before. Rain returned to Blackridge with the same relentless rhythm remembered from October 1988. Detectives often joked that the weather itself seemed determined to erase evidence before human eyes could find it. Yet this time, technology was working against time instead of surrendering to it. The unidentified key recovered from Leon Mercer's toolbox became the next obsession. It showed almost no corrosion. Whoever had stored it had wrapped it carefully in wax paper before sealing it inside a small envelope. Laboratory technicians dusted it for modern DNA. Nothing usable remained. Years of handling had left only fragmented biological material, too degraded for a complete profile. Attention shifted to the key's shape. It belonged to an older residential lock manufactured during the late 1970s. Thousands had been sold throughout Oregon. Investigators spent weeks comparing the cut pattern against archived locksmith records that still existed on microfilm. Most records had been destroyed decades earlier. One survived. A retired locksmith in Salem had preserved handwritten duplicate key orders inside weather binders stored in his attic. He had intended to throw them away after retiring, but never found the time. Detectives turned page after page beneath careful white gloves. Hundreds of addresses, thousands of names. Then one order caught their attention. October 1988. Replacement rear door key. Property located outside Blackridge. The address belonged not to Emily Carter, but to an empty rental farmhouse less than 3 miles away. Investigators drove there immediately. The structure had long since collapsed. Only its stone foundation remained beneath thick blackberry bushes. County records revealed that the owner had rented the property to seasonal logging workers throughout the 1980s. Rental applications had never been digitized. Payment receipts had disappeared. No official list of tenants remained. Still, neighbors remembered trucks arriving every autumn. Most workers stayed only weeks before disappearing to another contract. One elderly resident offered a memory that had haunted him for years. There was one fellow, he said quietly, kept to himself, always parked facing the road, like he wanted to leave fast. He could not remember the man's name, only that he drove a dark pickup. Ground-penetrating radar was brought to the abandoned property. Investigators expected nothing. Instead, the survey identified several buried metallic objects near what had once been a detached shed. Excavation began the following morning. Rusted cans, broken tools, scrap metal. Then, beneath nearly 4 feet of compacted earth, a canvas bag emerged. Its zipper had almost completely dissolved. Inside were ordinary objects wrapped in decayed cloth, a flashlight, work gloves, a folding knife, and a small disposable camera. The film had never been developed. Specialists transported it to a laboratory capable of recovering images from deteriorated negatives. Everyone understood the odds were poor. Days later, faint photographs slowly appeared on a monitor. Logging equipment, forest roads, campfires, workers standing beside trucks. Nothing remarkable. Then came the final frame. A blurred image captured through rain-speckled glass. The Carter farmhouse, taken from the county road. No timestamp, no photographer, no explanation. The photograph proved only one thing. Someone connected to that abandoned rental had watched the farmhouse before Emily's death. Detectives compared the vehicles visible in the background against registration archives. One pickup appeared partially visible at the edge of the frame, dark in color. Long bed, chrome bumper. The image lacked enough detail for a definitive identification, but it looked strikingly similar to the model Mercer had owned. News of the discovery never reached the public. Investigators wanted silence. If another person had been involved, publicity might destroy the last opportunity to learn the truth. Meanwhile, Leon Mercer agreed to a third interview. This time he appeared noticeably different. Older, more tired, less certain. He admitted renting the abandoned farmhouse during logging work in 1988. He admitted driving past Emily Carter's home several times. He claimed he had simply admired the scenery while searching for shortcuts between job sites. Detectives listened without interruption. Then one investigator quietly placed a recovered photograph on the table. Mercer's eyes stopped moving. For several seconds, he stared without speaking. His breathing slowed. Finally, he leaned back. "I've never seen that picture." It was an answer, but not to the question detectives had asked. No one had claimed he had seen it. They had only asked whether he recognized the location. The interview ended shortly afterward. Outside, investigators reviewed every recording frame by frame. Mercer's reactions mattered more than his words. Experienced interview analysts noted subtle changes in posture whenever Emily Carter's name entered the conversation. Not proof, not enough for an arrest, but enough to keep digging. Back in the evidence room, one detective reopened a faded envelope overlooked during previous reviews. Inside rested several handwritten notes from 1988. Most were routine. One was different. A deputy had scribbled a single sentence after speaking with an anonymous caller 2 days after the murder. Male voice stated investigators were looking at the wrong door. Nothing more. No phone number. No recording. The note had never been investigated because dozens of false tips arrived every week during the original inquiry. Now that sentence suddenly carried enormous weight. The fingerprint had been recovered from the rear laundry room door. How had an anonymous caller known investigators were concentrating on the front entrance? The information had never been released publicly. Someone knew details only the killer, or someone close to the investigation, should have known. For the first time in nearly 4 decades, detectives began considering a possibility more unsettling than any they had imagined before. Perhaps Leon Mercer had not acted alone. Perhaps someone had remained invisible since the very beginning. The cold case was no longer simply about identifying a fingerprint. It had become a search for every hidden connection buried beneath 38 years of silence, forgotten paperwork, and fading memories. And with every new discovery, the darkness surrounding October 1988 seemed to grow deeper instead of clearer. The rain never truly stopped over Black Hollow. It simply changed its voice. Sometimes it whispered across rusted rooftops. Sometimes it hammered against broken windows with enough force to make abandoned houses sound alive. Every resident learned to sleep through the storm. Every resident except Detective Nathan Graves. He had not slept for nearly 30 hours. The evidence board covering one wall of the temporary task force office looked less like an investigation and more like an obsession. Hundreds of photographs overlapped newspaper clippings. Red strings crossed a room in impossible directions. Victims, witnesses, vehicles, phone calls, anonymous letters. Nothing aligned neatly. Nothing explained why 5 people had vanished from Black Hollow over a span of 23 years without leaving behind a single body. The oldest file sat in the center. October 14, 1988. Claire Holloway, 29 years old, elementary school teacher. Last seen walking home after leaving the town library just before closing time. She never arrived. Her handbag was discovered the following morning beside Miller Bridge. Everything remained inside. Wallet, house keys, wedding ring, a paperback novel opened to page 143. No blood, no signs of violence, no footprints. The river search lasted 12 days. Nothing surfaced. At the time, investigators concluded Claire had fallen into the flooded river. Nathan hated that conclusion. People slipped into rivers. People drowned. But Rivers did not carefully place handbags on dry concrete. He reached for another file. April 1994. Jason Miller, 34, volunteer firefighter. His pickup truck was found parked outside the abandoned Ashwood sawmill. Engine cold. Driver's door open. Flashlight still inside. Jason disappeared without a trace. No struggle. No ransom. No financial motive. The town mourned, then moved on. Nathan pinned the photograph beside Claire's. Different years. Different victims. Different circumstances. One impossible similarity. Both investigations recorded an unidentified fingerprint. Too partial to identify. Too clear to ignore. A knock echoed through the office. Detective Elena Brooks entered carrying an evidence box coated in dust. "You need to see this." Nathan opened the lid. Inside rested dozens of cassette tapes, interview recordings. Original investigators had stored them away before digital archiving existed. Most had never been transcribed. The first tape squealed before settling into static. A detective's tired voice filled the room. Interview with Thomas Weaver, October 17th, 1988. Another voice answered, older, uneasy. "I already told the other officers. I saw someone watching the bridge." Nathan paused the recording. Watching. Not crossing. Watching. He rewound the tape, played it again. The witness repeated the same sentence. "I thought he was waiting for someone." The original detective never asked who. Instead, the interview shifted toward weather conditions. Nathan closed his eyes. 38 years. 38 years since someone had ignored the most important sentence in the entire interview. They continued listening. The witness described the stranger only briefly. Tall, dark raincoat, weit blimmertet, standing perfectly still beneath the bridge lights. Then came one detail that froze both detectives. He wasn't looking at the river. A long pause crackled through the cassette. He was looking toward town, like he knew someone was coming. Silence filled the office. Elena slowly lowered the volume. If Claire disappeared before reaching the bridge, Nathan finished the sentence. Then whoever stood there wasn't waiting for her. He was waiting for someone else. Outside, thunder rolled across Black Hollow. Rain struck the windows harder than before. Nathan walked to the evidence board and removed every string connecting Claire to the river. For nearly 4 decades, the investigation had assumed the bridge marked the end of her journey. Now it looked more like the beginning. He unfolded an old survey map of Black Hollow drawn before the new highway bypassed the town. Most people focused on the roads. Nathan focused on what lay beneath them. An abandoned maintenance tunnel once connected the old storm drains beneath Main Street to the foundations of the Ashwood sawmill. The tunnel had been sealed after flood in the early 1970s. At least that was what the official report claimed. Nathan searched deeper. The final inspection document was missing. No engineer's signature. No completion certificate. Only a typed recommendation. Seal entrance immediately. Recommended. Not confirmed. He looked toward Elena. If that tunnel stayed open. She nodded before he finished. That someone could cross half the town underground without ever being seen. Neither detective spoke again. The map remained between them. Outside, Black Hollow slept beneath another night of endless rain. Somewhere beyond the fog, hidden beneath streets everyone believed they understood, an unanswered secret waited in complete darkness. And for the first time since the disappearances began, Nathan believed the town itself had been hiding the truth. Nathan left the office just after midnight, without another word. The rain had eased into a fine mist, hanging low over Black Hollow like smoke drifting across forgotten graves. Streetlights struggled to pierce the fog. Every storefront was dark. Every porch stood empty. The town looked abandoned. Yet Nathan could not shake the feeling that someone was watching from behind one of those blackened windows. The old survey map lay folded on the passenger seat. One location had refused to leave his mind. The sealed storm drain entrance beneath Ashwood Hill. Official records claimed it had been filled with reinforced concrete in 1973 after catastrophic flooding. Yet the missing completion report suggested something had interrupted the project, or someone had wanted future investigators to believe it had been completed. By sunrise, a small search team assembled outside the overgrown entrance. Detective Elena Brooks, forensic engineer Marcus Hale, 2 crime scene technicians, no reporters, no marked police vehicles. Nathan wanted no rumors until they knew what they were dealing with. The entrance looked exactly as the records described. Thick vines swallowed the concrete archway. Moss covered decades of neglect. Fallen branches blocked most of the opening. Marcus knelt beside the wall and brushed away layers of dirt with a stiff nylon brush. He frowned. This concrete isn't 50 years old. Nathan crouched beside him. Marcus tapped the surface with a small hammer. The sound echoed sharply. Hollow. Everyone fell silent. The engineer measured the wall. Only 6 inches thick. Far thinner than required by the construction standards of the time. Someone hadn't sealed the tunnel. Someone had built a convincing facade. The demolition began immediately. Chunks of concrete broke away one after another. Cold air rushed from the darkness behind them. Air. Moving air. The tunnel wasn't collapsed. It was breathing. Nathan switched on his flashlight and stepped through the opening. The beam disappeared into a corridor stretching farther than anyone expected. Brick walls glistened with moisture. Ancient drainage pipes lined the ceiling. The floor remained strangely dry despite the constant rain above. Someone had maintained this place. Not recently, but often enough to prevent complete collapse. Fresh boot prints were impossible after decades, yet subtle disturbances appeared everywhere. Broken cobwebs, rust scraped from metal railings, dust collected unevenly across the floor. Signs, tiny signs. Someone had walked here long after the tunnel was supposedly sealed. The team advanced slowly. Every sound echoed endlessly. Dripping water, boots against concrete, steady breathing. Nothing else. Then Elena stopped. Her flashlight illuminated a faded symbol painted on the wall. A white circle. Inside it, 3 vertical lines crossed by a single horizontal stroke. Nathan photographed it immediately. No one recognized the marking. They continued deeper. After nearly 400 yards, the passage divided. One tunnel curved toward the abandoned sawmill. The other disappeared beneath downtown Black Hollow. Marcus examined the brickwork. These branches weren't part of the original drainage system. Nathan understood immediately. Someone had expanded the network, not city workers. The construction was crude but deliberate. Hand tools. Brick by brick. Year after year. The realization settled heavily over the group. This wasn't simply an abandoned tunnel. It had become someone's hidden pathway. Elena called Nathan quietly. You need to see this. Against the wall rested dozens of melted candle stubs. Nearby sat modern batteries, plastic water bottles, a rusted folding chair. Someone had occupied the chamber repeatedly. The air felt suddenly colder. Nathan swept his flashlight upward. Deep scratches covered the ceiling. Parallel grooves. Too regular to be natural. Marcus studied them for several seconds. Pulley marks. Nathan looked back. For lifting something? Marcus nodded slowly. Or lowering it. No one answered. Silence swallowed the tunnel again. Farther ahead, the passage narrowed before opening into a forgotten maintenance room beneath the old courthouse. Dust coated nearly every surface, except one. A steel cabinet. Someone had wiped its handle clean. Recently, Nathan carefully opened the door. Inside were shelves filled with weathered notebooks. Dozens of them, each labeled only with a year. 1986, 1987, 1988, 1989. Every year continued without interruption until only 3 years earlier. Elena carefully removed the oldest volume. The pages contained no names, only dates, times, weather conditions, vehicle descriptions, short observations. Blue sedan parked beside church. Left 8:42 p.m. Teacher locked library. Alone. Heavy rain. Few pedestrians. Nathan's heartbeat quickened. These weren't diary entries. They were surveillance logs. Someone had watched the town for decades. Methodically, patiently. The 1988 notebook stopped them cold. October 14th. Library lights out. Subject walking home. Umbrella. No companion. The next line had been torn away. Nathan examined the missing edge. The page hadn't deteriorated naturally. It had been removed with precision. Whatever had originally been written there, that someone had wanted erased. Before anyone could speak, Elena noticed another object beneath the bottom shelf. An old cassette recorder. Dust covered its buttons, but the batteries had been removed. Marcus opened the tape compartment. One cassette remained inside. Nathan held it carefully. Across its label, written in black ink, were 4 chilling words. Do not play here. No one argued. The recorder and tape were sealed into evidence. As the team prepared to leave, Nathan turned for one last look down the endless tunnel. The darkness seemed unchanged, silent, patient, as though it had been waiting years for someone to return. He could not explain the feeling settling in his chest. The investigation had finally uncovered the hidden heart of Black Hollow. Yet every answer seemed to reveal something far more disturbing. Because whoever built this underground network had not simply hidden from the town. They had been studying it, watching it, recording it, for nearly 40 years. And if the newest notebook was only 3 years old, then whoever had written those entries might still be alive. Somewhere above them, hidden among the ordinary faces of Black Hollow, someone knew exactly what lay beneath the streets. And they might already know the tunnel had been found. Nathan refused to wait until morning. Within 20 minutes of returning from the tunnel, the evidence room became a maze of cameras, scanners, and forensic workstations. Every notebook was photographed before a single page was turned. The paper was brittle, but the handwriting remained remarkably consistent. Decades passed across the pages, yet the same careful script appeared year after year. Whoever wrote the journals had extraordinary patience. Every entry followed the same pattern. Time, weather, location, observation, never an opinion, never an explanation, just facts, cold, detached, clinical. Elena spread the notebooks across a long table. There has to be a reason. Nathan nodded. Nobody spends 40 years writing this much unless they're waiting for something. The oldest volume dated back to 1983. The newest ended only 31 months earlier. Thousands of observations, thousands of ordinary moments. Children leaving school, delivery trucks arriving, church services ending, power outages, funeral processions, storms, festivals, election days. Nothing seemed connected until Marcus noticed a pattern. Look at the dates. Everyone leaned closer. Not every day had been recorded, only certain ones. Nathan grabbed a calendar. The intervals looked random at first. Then they aligned. Every notebook contained entries made exactly 14 days apart. Always 14. Never 13. Never 15. Someone had followed an almost ritual-like schedule for decades. Nathan circled the dates on the calendar. They weren't documenting events. They were checking something. The realization settled over the room. The author wasn't interested in people. People simply happened to be there. The town itself had been the subject. Black Hollow, every 2 weeks, for 40 years. Elena flipped to the final notebook. The last complete entry stopped abruptly. Weather clear. Population unchanged. Activity normal. Nothing after that. No forgettable. No explanation. Just silence. Nathan compared the ink to previous years. Same pen. Same pressure. Same handwriting. The writer had not gradually stopped. They had vanished, or died, or been interrupted. Before anyone could continue, dispatch called. An elderly man named Walter Briggs had arrived at the station asking to speak with whoever had reopened the Hollow investigation. Nathan met him in interview room 2. Walter was 86, thin, soft-spoken. His hands trembled continuously. He refused coffee, refused water. He stared at the floor for nearly a minute before speaking. I saw the symbol. Nathan immediately reached into his folder. The white circle with 3 vertical lines. Walter's face lost what little color remained. I knew it. You've seen it before? Walter nodded slowly. When I was a boy, the room became perfectly still. Walter explained that, in the late 1950s, children often dared each other to explore the woods beyond Ashwood Hill. One afternoon, he and 2 friends discovered an old stone doorway built into the hillside. The strange symbol had been carved above it. The boys entered. Only briefly, they heard footsteps somewhere inside. Not running. Walking. Slow. Measured. Too deliberate to belong to another child. They fled. The following week, Walter returned with his older brother. The doorway had disappeared. Not collapsed. Gone. As though it had never existed. Nathan asked why he had never reported the story. Walter smiled weakly. Because nobody believed children. He hesitated. There was something else. Nathan waited. We weren't alone. Walter described seeing a man standing among the trees, not chasing them, watching them. He wore a dark coat despite the summer heat. His face remained hidden beneath a wide hat, exactly the same description recorded by witnesses decades later. Nathan felt every hair on his arms rise. The description had survived nearly 70 years. One figure, one appearance. Impossible. No ordinary person remained unchanged for that long. Unless it had never been the same man. Perhaps someone wanted witnesses to remember only the clothing, the hat, the coat, an identity passed from one person to another. A role, not a face. Back in the evidence room, Elena had made another discovery. Several pages contained tiny impressions invisible to the naked eye. The original writer had pressed hard enough for words to imprint onto the following sheet. Using oblique lighting and digital enhancement, technicians slowly reconstructed the missing text. One hidden sentence emerged. Observer replaced. Nothing more. Nathan read it twice. Observer, not owner, not author. Observer. He searched every notebook. The phrase appeared again. 1989. Observer replaced. 1998. Observer replaced. 2011. Observer replaced. Always alone. Always between notebooks. No names. No explanation. Marcus looked at Nathan. You think more than one person kept these? Nathan answered without looking up. I think they were expected to. The room fell silent again. Somewhere, sometime, one observer had handed the journals to another. The records continued. The handwriting never changed, which meant every successor had been trained to imitate the previous one perfectly, not simply to observe, to disappear, to become invisible. Outside the station, rain began falling once more. Nathan walked to the window. Black Hollow looked peaceful. Families drove home from work. Children rode bicycles. The bakery closed for the evening. Nothing about the town suggested generations of hidden surveillance, yet the notebooks proved otherwise. Someone had watched every major event for decades without anyone noticing, and someone had taught others to continue after them. Nathan finally understood why the disappearances had never made sense. They had always assumed they were hunting a killer. Now another possibility emerged. What if the disappearances were only a small part of something much older? Something organized, something that had existed beneath Black Hollow long before Claire Holloway vanished. His phone vibrated. A text message. Unknown number. No attached image. Only 6 words. Stop digging before someone else disappears. Nathan read the message twice. No fear entered his face. Only certainty. Whoever sent it knew the investigation had reached the tunnel, knew about the notebooks, knew someone was finally uncovering the truth, which meant one thing above all else. The observers were not just history. At least one of them was still watching. Nathan did not tell anyone about the message. Not Elena, not Marcus, not even Chief Donovan. He stared at the glowing screen for several seconds before powering the phone off completely and sealing it inside an evidence bag. Whoever had sent the warning wanted him to react. They wanted fear. They wanted hesitation. Instead, Nathan wanted answers. By dawn, a digital forensics team traced the message through multiple relay servers. Every route ended in failure. The sender had hidden behind layers of anonymous networks, bouncing the signal across continents before it reached Black Hollow. Professional, or someone who had spent years preparing for exactly this moment. Nathan walked alone through the quiet streets before sunrise. The town was just beginning to wake. A bakery employee unlocked the front door. Delivery trucks rolled past without slowing. A jogger crossed the square wearing headphones, completely unaware that an investigation beneath the town had exposed something that should never have existed. Black Hollow looked ordinary. Perhaps that was its greatest disguise. Back at headquarters, Elena had spent the night mapping every observation recorded in the journals. Hundreds of color pins now covered an enormous satellite image of the town. At first glance, they appeared random. Schools, churches, road intersections, the river, the abandoned sawmill, the old hospital. Nathan stepped closer. No, he reached for a ruler. One line connected 6 observation points. Another crossed it, then another. The patterns slowly emerged. The observations were not documenting people. They were documenting sightlines. Every recorded location offered a clear view of another, like pieces on a giant chessboard. Marcus overlaid the tunnel map beneath the surface map. The room fell silent. Several underground passages ended directly beneath the observation points. Whoever built the network had designed places where someone could merge, watch the town unseen, then disappear underground again within minutes. They weren't hiding from the town, Elena whispered. They were studying it. Nathan nodded, and they always had an escape route. The discovery forced investigators to search municipal archives dating back nearly a century. Old engineering drawings, property transfers, construction permits. Most revealed nothing unusual. One file did. In 1931, Black Hollow approved a major drainage expansion after severe flooding damaged the lower district. The project was never completed. Funding disappeared. The contractor declared bankruptcy. Construction supposedly stopped. Yet the tunnels they had discovered were far larger than anything described in the surviving plans. Someone had continued building after the official project ended, without permission, without records, for decades. Nathan flipped through payroll documents from the abandoned project. Dozens of names. Most meant nothing. One appeared repeatedly. Elias Rowan, foreman. No surviving photograph. No death certificate. No burial record. He simply vanished from official history after 1933. Nathan searched further. Property tax records. Military registrations. Census reports. Nothing. It was as though Elias Rowan had stepped out of history without leaving footprints behind. Marcus looked over Nathan's shoulder. Either he disappeared, or someone erased him. The words lingered in the room. Hours later, another breakthrough arrived unexpectedly. Forensic technicians finished restoring the cassette labeled "Do Not Play Here." Rather than listening in the station, Nathan insisted on using the university's audio laboratory. The tape was fragile. Any damage could destroy whatever remained. The room darkened as specialists threaded the cassette into a restored analog player. Static, a low mechanical hum. 37 seconds of silence. Then footsteps. Slow, measured, exactly like Walter Briggs had described hearing beneath Ashwood Hills 70 years earlier. No voices, only footsteps. A metallic creak echoed somewhere in the distance. Then another sound, a door closing. Heavy, steel. The footsteps stopped. Several seconds passed. A man's voice finally spoke. Calm, older, emotionless. The observation is complete. Silence. Another voice answered. Younger. We've been seen. The first voice responded almost immediately. Then the observer must change. The recording ended. Nobody in the laboratory moved. Nathan replayed the final sentence 3 more times. The observer must change. Exactly the phrase hidden inside the journals. The recording was impossible to date. No names, no location, no clues beyond the echoes surrounding the voices. Still, one fact became undeniable. The journals and the recording belonged to the same hidden organization. Someone had documented Black Hollow for generations. Someone had trained replacements. And someone had considered discovery serious enough to replace an observer immediately. As the team returned to headquarters, another report awaited them. A groundskeeper working near the old cemetery had discovered fresh digging behind the abandoned chapel. Investigators rushed to the scene. The disturbed earth covered a rectangle barely 6 feet long. Too small for construction. Too deliberate to be natural. Crime scene technicians excavated carefully. 10 inches below the surface, a wooden box appeared. No markings. No lock. Inside lay a single object wrapped in oilcloth. A pocket watch. Silver. Beautifully preserved. Nathan opened the engraved cover. 3 words were carved inside. For the next observer. Beneath the watch rested a folded sheet of yellowed paper. The handwriting matched the journal's perfectly. It contained only one sentence. Never watch the people. Watch what they protect. Nathan read it again. The words unsettled him more than any threat. Because for 40 years investigators had focused on victims, witnesses, suspects. What if they had all been looking in the wrong direction? What if the disappearances were never the true objective? What if every missing person had stumbled across something hidden beneath Black Hollow? That's something valuable enough that generations of unseen observers had guarded it without ever revealing its existence? Nathan closed the pocket watch slowly. Outside the cemetery gates, ordinary life continued. Parents picked children up from school. Traffic moved through the town square. Church bells echoed across the valley. No one realized that beneath their feet, beneath their homes, beneath decades of ordinary history, another history was beginning to emerge. One that had never been written in books, only in hidden journals, only by unseen observers. And somewhere in Black Hollow, someone had just learned that the investigators had found the watch. Because before Nathan's team could even leave the cemetery, his phone vibrated once more. Another anonymous message. This time only 4 words. You open the box. Nathan looked at the message for less than a second before locking the screen. No surprise. No anger. Only a growing certainty. The sender was not guessing. They knew exactly what the investigation had uncovered, almost as quickly as the investigators themselves. That meant one possibility was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Someone inside Black Hollow was feeding information to the observers. The question was no longer if, it was who. By nightfall, every member of the task force surrendered their phones for forensic examination. Emails, call logs, encrypted messaging apps, location histories. Everything was preserved. Nobody protested. Everyone understood the stakes. Nothing unusual appeared. No hidden applications. No suspicious calls. No unexplained financial transactions. If information was leaking, it wasn't happening through ordinary channels. Nathan stood alone in the evidence room long after everyone else had left. The journals surrounded him. The pocket watch rested beneath protective glass. The anonymous messages glowed from printed screenshots pinned to the board. Then his eyes drifted towards something he had almost ignored from the beginning. The dates. Every journal. Every message. Every disappearance. Every strange event. Then, always rain. Claire Holloway vanished during a storm. Jason Miller disappeared after days of heavy rainfall. The tunnel entrance had remained hidden until relentless rain softened the hillside. Even the anonymous text had arrived during storms. Coincidence? Nathan stopped believing in coincidence several days ago. He requested 40 years of weather archives. The computer processed thousands of records overnight. At sunrise, Elena entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. Nathan hadn't moved. He pointed silently toward the monitor. A graph stretched across the screen. Blue markers represented major storms. The 2 lines almost overlapped. Not perfectly, but closely enough to make everyone in the room uneasy. Marcus stared at the chart. Why would weather matter? Nathan answered quietly. It doesn't. Marcus frowned. Nathan enlarged the satellite image. The river does. Black Hollow had been built inside a narrow valley. Every major storm caused underground water levels to rise dramatically. Marcus suddenly understood. The tunnels. Nathan nodded. Floodwater changes the underground passages. Certain routes became impassable. Others opened. Old drainage gates shifted beneath hydraulic pressure. What looked like a maze during dry seasons became an entirely different maze after heavy rain. Whoever operated beneath Black Hollow understood those changes perfectly. The observers had been timing their movements with nature itself. Before anyone could continue, dispatch interrupted. A maintenance crew repairing a damaged water main had uncovered a sealed brick chamber beneath Oak Street. Nathan's team arrived within minutes. Workers stood silently beside an excavation nearly 12 feet deep. A narrow doorway had emerged from the exposed earth. Its bricks matched the tunnel beneath Ashwood Hill exactly. The same white symbol appeared above the entrance. 3 vertical lines inside a circle. This chamber, however, had been intentionally sealed from the inside. Engineers carefully removed the remaining bricks. A stale current of air drifted upward. Unlike the previous tunnels, this room contained furniture, a wooden desk, shelving, a narrow iron bed, everything covered by decades of dust. Someone had lived there. For how long? No one could tell. Elena photographed every corner before touching anything. Nathan examined the desk. Neatly arranged across its surface lay stacks of yellowed maps. Not maps of Black Hollow, maps of neighboring towns. Dozens of them, each marked with identical white circles. Marcus slowly spread them across the table. The room fell silent. There weren't just 1 or 2 locations. There were 17. 17 different towns, each connected by handwritten notes, distances, travel times, observation schedules. Black Hollow had never been unique. It had merely been one point in something much larger. Nathan whispered, almost to himself. This wasn't one observer. He looked across the maps. It was a network. For decades, investigators believed they were chasing a local mystery. Now that assumption collapsed. If these maps were genuine, similar observers might have existed across an entire region, perhaps longer, perhaps still active. Hidden inside a drawer, Elena found a leather-bound ledger. Unlike the journals, this one contained names, not full names, only initials, dates, assignments. Most entries were impossible to interpret. One stood out, NG. Nathan frowned. My initials. The date beside them. That was yesterday. Nobody spoke. Marcus looked toward Nathan. That's impossible. Nathan agreed. It should have been. Someone had written his initials into a ledger hidden underground before the chamber had been discovered. Unless the writing wasn't recent. Laboratory analysis later confirmed the ink was more than 25 years old. 25 years. Nathan had been a child. Yet somehow his initials already appeared inside the ledger. He searched surrounding entries. Each pair of initials matched someone who had later become connected to the investigation. Retired detectives, former sheriffs, archivists, surveyors, people who, years after their names appeared, unknowingly uncovered fragments of the mystery. Nathan's heartbeat slowed. The observers hadn't simply watched the town. They had watched the people most likely to investigate them. For generations. One page near the back had been folded carefully. Nathan opened it. A single sentence filled the center. Every observer believes they are searching. Another line followed beneath it. None realized they were chosen. The words settled over the room like winter frost. No one moved. No one spoke. For the first time since reopening the case, Nathan felt genuine uncertainty. What if every discovery, every anonymous message, every hidden room, every clue had not been mistakes? What if someone wanted the investigation to follow this exact path? Outside, thunder echoed across the valley once more. Rain began falling against the excavation site. Workers hurried to cover equipment. Detectives packed evidence. Nathan remained standing inside the underground chamber, staring at the ledger. A faint drip echoed somewhere beyond the far wall. One, then another, then a third. He raised his flashlight. The wall wasn't solid. Between 2 rows of bricks ran a narrow vertical gap, no wider than a finger. Cold air flowed through it. Marcus placed his hand against the stone. It's hollow. Nathan stepped back. The chamber they had just uncovered had another chamber behind it, one that none of the surviving maps mentioned. And from somewhere beyond that hidden wall, someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. Then silence. No one spoke. The 3 knocks echoed through the hidden chamber, each one softer than the last, until the silence that followed became heavier than the sound itself. Nathan raised a hand, signaling everyone to stay still. The room froze. No movement, no voices, only the distant drip of water, somewhere deep inside the walls. Marcus pressed his ear against the narrow gap between the bricks. Nothing. He waited another 30 seconds. Still nothing. It could be settling, he whispered. Nathan didn't answer. Concrete settled. Old pipes settled. Hidden chambers beneath forgotten towns did not knock 3 times with perfect rhythm. He stepped closer and swept his flashlight across the wall. The bricks looked identical to the rest of the room, but the mortar surrounding the center section was noticeably newer. Someone had rebuilt this wall. Not decades ago. Years ago. The color difference was slight, almost invisible beneath the dust. But once Nathan noticed it, he couldn't look away. Elena crouched near the floor. Look! A faint scrape marked the concrete. It curved in a shallow arc. Marcus measured it with a tape. 83 centimeters. Nathan immediately understood. It's not a wall. Marcus nodded. It's a door. A hidden pivot door. The scratches came from years of opening and closing. Someone had disguised it perfectly. Forensic technicians photographed every inch before Marcus carefully inserted a fiber optic camera through the narrow gap. The tiny lens slipped into darkness. The monitor remained black for several seconds. Then the image stabilized. An empty corridor. Stone floor. Brick ceiling. Dust. No movement. Marcus slowly rotated the camera. The beam illuminated another wall. More shelves. Wooden crates. A narrow wooden chair. No people. No obvious danger. Nathan exhaled. Open it. Marcus located a concealed latch after nearly 15 minutes of careful searching. With a dull metallic click, the entire brick section shifted inward. Cold air poured into the room. The smell was unmistakable. Old paper, oil, damp stone, and something else. Smoke, not fresh, but recent enough that someone had lit a fire there within the last few weeks. Nathan entered first. The hidden chamber was larger than expected, nearly 40 feet long. Every wall was lined with shelves. Hundreds of document boxes sat in perfect order. Each carried the same symbol found throughout the tunnels. 3 vertical lines inside a circle. No names, only years. 1948, 1949, 1950, 1951, 1952, 1953, 1954, 1955. Nathan felt a chill crawl across his back. This wasn't a storage room. It was an archive maintained for generations. Elena opened the nearest box. Thousands of them, black and white, color, digital prints. Each showed ordinary moments in Black Hollow. Children boarding school buses, farmers repairing fences, birthday parties, town festivals, church weddings, funerals, everyday life. Every photograph had been taken without the subjects knowing. Nathan picked one up. A family picnic beside Hollow Lake. Date written on the back. June 14, 1986. The smiling family looked perfectly ordinary. Then Elena quietly pointed toward the edge of the image, standing between 2 trees, almost hidden by shadow. It was a man wearing a dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat, watching. Nathan grabbed another photograph. Same figure, different year, different location. Again, another, and another. The figure appeared again and again across nearly 50 years of photographs. Never in the center, always near the edge, always watching. Marcus shook his head. No one could be the same age. Nathan interrupted him. It isn't the same man. The clothing, the posture, the silhouette, those remain constant. The face never appeared clearly enough to identify. Exactly as Walter Briggs had described decades earlier, the observer wasn't a person. It was an identity, a role inherited from one generation to the next. Elena discovered another cabinet. Unlike the others, it was locked. Marcus carefully picked the old mechanism. Inside rested a reel-to-reel projector and dozens of film canisters. Each label carried only a date. No taitas, no descriptions. One canister had been placed separately from the others. A small handwritten note rested on top. When the archive is found, begin here. Nathan exchanged a glance with Elena. Someone had expected this room to be discovered. Eventually, the projector still functioned after Marcus cleaned its mechanism. The lights were switched off. The first reel began turning. Static flickered across the wall. Grainy black and white footage slowly emerged. A town square, not Black Hollow. Another town, children playing, horse-drawn wagons. The year printed in the corner, 1938. The camera never moved. It simply observed. People entered the frame, left, returned. Minutes passed. Then, at exactly 7 minutes and 12 seconds, every person in the square simultaneously turned toward the camera. Not gradually, not by coincidence. All at once, every head, every face, every pair of eyes, they stared directly into the lens. No one spoke. The film continued running. No one moved. Dozens of people simply stood frozen, looking straight toward whoever had been filming them. Nathan felt his pulse quicken. Stop it. Marcus froze the frame. The room remained silent. Elena stepped closer to the projected image. They're not looking at the camera. Nathan frowned. What do you mean? She pointed carefully. Their eyes. Everyone leaned forward. She was right. The crowd wasn't looking toward the camera. They were looking at something standing beside it, something outside the frame. Marcus slowly rewound several seconds. The people laughed, walked, talked normally. Then, without warning, every face turned toward the unseen point again, exactly together, exactly synchronized. Nathan had investigated murders, kidnappings, serial offenders. Nothing had ever unsettled him like this. He wasn't frightened by what appeared in the film. He was frightened by what didn't. Whatever had caused dozens of unrelated people to react simultaneously. That remained invisible. The projector clicked to a stop. The film ended. No explanation. No narration. Only silence. Nathan removed the reel carefully. Beneath it lay another envelope. Smaller. Sealed with dark red wax. Across the front, in the same precise handwriting found throughout the archive, were 8 words. Do not continue unless the pattern has begun. Nathan stared at the seal. For the first time since entering the tunnels, he hesitated. Every instinct told him that opening the envelope would answer questions. Every instinct also warned that someone had intended those answers to be found only under very specific circumstances. Outside the hidden archive, rain battered the streets of Black Hollow once again. Far above the tunnels, the town carried on as if nothing had changed. Children hurried home from school. Shopkeepers closed for the evening. Lights appeared one by one in familiar windows. No one knew that beneath their feet, buried beneath decades of brick and stone, investigators had uncovered a secret archive documenting generations of unseen observation. And no one knew that, somewhere beyond the walls of that archive, another observer might already be making a new entry, recording the exact moment the envelope was found. Nathan held the sealed envelope without opening it. The wax had darkened with age, but it had never cracked. Whoever sealed it had expected time to pass. Years, perhaps decades, yet the envelope had survived untouched beneath Black Hollow, waiting with impossible patience. Marcus broke the silence. If we leave it sealed, we'll always wonder. Elena answered before Nathan could. If we open it too soon, we lose the chance to understand why it was sealed in the first place. Nathan looked around the archive once more. Nothing inside the room appeared hurried. Every shelf had been dusted recently enough that only a thin layer covered the boxes. The oil lamp on the far table still contained fuel. The chair beside it had not collapsed with age. Tiny details suggested regular maintenance. Someone had been here, not generations ago. Recently, he slipped the envelope into an evidence sleeve. Not here. No one argued. The task force spent the next 6 hours cataloging every document before removing a single item. Laser scanners created a complete, 3-dimensional model of the chamber. Every shelf, every nail, every crack in the brickwork. Marcus remained behind after everyone else climbed back to the surface. Nathan noticed him staring at the floor. What is it? Marcus pointed toward the dust. At first Nathan saw nothing. Then the pattern emerged. 2 distinct sets of footprints crossed the chamber. One belonged to the investigators. The other, I had been there before they arrived. The impressions were faint, almost invisible, yet unmistakable. Boots. modern tread, size 11, perhaps 12. The prince entered through the hidden door, walked directly to the locked cabinet, stopped for several minutes, then left again. No wondering, no hesitation. Whoever entered already knew exactly where to go. Marcus crouched lower. The dust hasn't settled. Nathan understood immediately. These prints weren't months old. They weren't even weeks old. Someone had walked through the archives shortly before the investigators discovered it. Maybe days, maybe hours. A cold realization settled over the room. The archive had never been abandoned. It had simply been unattended for a very short time. By evening, the chamber was secured under constant police guard, motion sensors, cameras, 2 officers stationed above ground. He trusted the officers. He did not trust the silence surrounding the place. At headquarters, forensic analysts began examining the thousands of photographs recovered from the archive. Artificial intelligence sorted faces, vehicles, buildings, weather conditions. Patterns invisible to human eyes slowly emerged. One analyst suddenly called Nathan over. "You need to see this." The computer displayed hundreds of images side by side, different decades, different cameras, different seasons. Yet every photograph contained one identical element: a clock, sometimes a church clock, sometimes a wristwatch, sometimes a storefront display, sometimes a dashboard. Every visible clock showed nearly the same time. 7:14. Nathan blinked. Another photograph. 7:14. Another. 7:13. Another. 7:15. Within a margin of 2 minutes. Every observation, every decade, every photographer, always around the same moment. Elena Froned. They weren't recording days. Nathan, finish your thought. They were recording a specific time. Why 7:14? No answer appeared in the journals. No explanation in the maps. Just repetition. Again and again. As if that brief moment each observation day mattered more than everything before or after it. The discovery led investigators back through every disappearance. Claire Holloway left the library shortly after 7. Jason Miller's last radio transmission was logged at 7:16. A missing postal worker from 2008 had checked his watch in security footage. 7:14. Nathan's pulse quickened. Every major event connected to Black Hollow converged around the same minute. Not exactly. Close enough. Too close. While analysts continued working, Chief Donovan entered quietly carrying an old cardboard file. "I found this in storage." The folder belonged to former Sheriff Harold Bennett, retired 28 years earlier, deceased 12 years ago. Inside rested only one handwritten letter. Never mailed, never signed. Nathan unfolded the page carefully. "If anyone finds this, understand that I failed. I believe we were hunting a murderer. I was wrong. The disappearances are consequences, not causes. The town has been protecting something long before any of us were born. I came close enough to see it once. That was the night they began watching me. If you continue, they will watch you too. If they start appearing where you live, leave Black Hollow immediately. Do not wait for proof." The letter ended there. No signature. No date. Only a water stain covering the final line. Nathan sat in silence. Harold Bennett had retired suddenly at 54 despite excellent health. The official explanation cited exhaustion. Friends described him as increasingly paranoid during his final years. Perhaps he hadn't been paranoid. Perhaps someone really had been watching. Nathan looked toward the evidence board. Every anonymous message, every journal, every photograph, every hidden room. The investigation had uncovered an organization built on patience, observation, preparation. Nothing suggested random violence. Everything suggested control. His thoughts were interrupted by a sharp alarm. One of the motion sensors inside the underground archive had activated. Then another, the live camera feed, appeared on the monitor. The first corridor remained empty. The second camera showed nothing. The third flickered briefly before stabilizing. Then everyone in the operations room leaned closer. A figure stood inside the archive. Dark coat, wide blimmeted, exactly like the silhouette hidden in the photographs. The person did not appear surprised by the cameras. Instead, they slowly turned toward the lens, raised one gloved hand, and placed a single sheet of paper on the wooden table. No hiri, no attempt to conceal themselves. They simply looked directly into the camera for several long seconds before stepping backward into the darkness beyond the shelves. Nathan shouted into the radio, "Move! Move now!" The officers sprinted underground. Less than 2 minutes later, they reached the archive. The room was empty. No hidden doors had opened. No tunnels showed signs of use. No fresh footprints appeared beyond the ones investigators had already documented. Only the sheet of paper remained exactly where the figure had left it. Nathan arrived moments later. The paper contained a single sentence written in the same careful handwriting as the journals. "The pattern has begun." No one touched the note. For nearly a full minute, the task force stood in absolute silence around the wooden table. Cameras continued recording. The overhead lights buzzed softly. Somewhere beyond the archive walls, water dripped through ancient stone with slow, measured precision. Nathan finally spoke. "Photograph it. Every angle, every fiber, every crease." Only after the documentation was complete did Elena carefully lift the paper with sterile forceps. The handwriting matched the journals almost perfectly. Almost. A forensic document examiner noticed something unusual under magnification. The pressure pattern was different. The letters looked identical, but they had been written by a different hand trained to imitate the original style. Nathan remembered the journals. Observer replaced. The words echoed in his mind. There had never been one observer. There had never even been one handwriting. There had been generations of people taught to become indistinguishable from those who came before them. The note contained no fingerprints, no usable DNA, no watermarks, nothing except 6 words. "The pattern has begun." What pattern? Marcus muttered. Nobody answered. The following morning, Black Hollow woke beneath clear skies for the first time in nearly a week. Something felt different, not dramatic, subtle. The bakery on Main Street failed to open at 6. Mrs. Donnelly, who had unlocked the doors every morning for 34 years, simply never arrived. Police found the shop empty. The ovens remained cold. Her purse sat beneath the front counter. Her glasses rested beside the cash register. The kettle still contained fresh water. It looked as though she had stepped away for only a moment. She had vanished. Nathan arrived within minutes. No signs of forced entry. No struggle. Nothing stolen. It was disturbingly familiar. The security cameras covering Main Street should have provided immediate answers. Instead, every camera stopped recording at exactly 7:14 a.m. The interruption lasted 73 seconds. When the footage resumed, Mrs. Donnelly was gone. No person entered. No person exited. Only an empty bakery remained. Nathan watched the footage again, and again, frame by frame. Nothing. The cameras did not malfunction. They had all continued recording. Every frame during those 73 seconds contained only static, perfectly synchronized, across every camera in town. Someone had blinded the entire surveillance system at precisely the same moment. News spread quickly. Black Hollow had another disappearance, the first in nearly 3 years. Reporters arrived before noon. Chief Donovan refused every interview. Nathan requested complete radio silence from the task force. If the observers were monitoring the investigation, he wanted them uncertain about what police actually knew. That afternoon, Elena made another discovery inside the journals. The entries stopped being purely observational once every several years. Tiny symbols occasionally appeared beside specific dates. Not words, not initials, just a small black triangle. Only 11 appeared across 40 years of notebooks. Nathan compared the marked dates against police records. Every triangle matched the disappearance. Not one more, not one less. The observers had known, perhaps before anyone else, perhaps before the victims themselves. Marcus spent the evening examining the archive's architecture. Hidden behind one shelving unit, he discovered an iron ventilation shaft climbing vertically toward the surface. The passage measured barely 20 inches wide, too narrow for most adults. Yet recent scratches lined the interior walls. Someone had climbed through it. Repeatedly, the shaft emerged beneath an abandoned greenhouse on the edge of town. The building had belonged to the Hollow Botanical Society before closing almost 20 years earlier. No electricity, no running water, no signs of occupation, until forensic lights illuminated the floor. Fresh mud, fresh footprints. Someone had left less than 12 hours earlier. Nathan followed the trail through broken weeds. It ended abruptly at the roadside. No tire marks, no discarded items. Only a single chess piece lying upside down in the dirt. A white knight. Nothing else. Nathan slipped it into an evidence bag. Back at headquarters, Elena stared at it for several long seconds. You play chess? Nathan nodded. A little. She turned the piece over. Someone had carved tiny letters into its base. E4. Marcus looked puzzled. Nathan wasn't. It's an opening move. Elena Froned. So, Nathan walked to the evidence board. No. He placed a knight beside the town map. Not a move. He pointed toward an old property survey, divided into grid coordinates. Columns. Rows. Exactly like a chessboard. A4. The location sat near the northern edge of Black Hollow. An abandoned railway signal tower, demolished decades earlier, or so the records claimed. Night had already fallen when the task force reached the location. Only the concrete foundation remained visible. Weeds covered almost everything. Marcus swept the area with ground-penetrating radar. Within minutes, another anomaly appeared. Rectangular, metallic, 8 feet below ground. Nathan closed his eyes briefly. Another chamber. Another secret. Heavy equipment arrived shortly after midnight. Hours passed. Then the excavator struck steel. Workers switched to hand tools. Slowly, a rusted hatch emerged from the earth. Unlike every previous discovery, this entrance carried no symbol, only a single engraved word. Observatory. The hatch resisted at first. Marcus forced the locking wheel clockwise. Metal groaned. Air escaped from below. Cold, dry, clean, far cleaner than any underground space should have been after decades. Nathan lowered a camera through the opening. The image appeared on the monitor. Nobody spoke. The chamber below wasn't another storage room. It wasn't another tunnel. It looked operational. Electric lights glowed softly despite having no visible power source. A long table stood at the center. Computer monitors lined one wall. Bookshelves covered another. Everything appeared neat, maintained, occupied. One coffee mug still sat beside an open notebook. Steam no longer rose from it, but the dark stain inside had not completely dried. Someone had been there recently, very recently. Nathan felt the weight of every discovery pressing against him. The journals, the photographs, the hidden archive, the anonymous messages, the disappearances. They had all pointed toward unseen observers. Now, for the first time. But the investigators had found the observer's workplace. And judging by the warmth still lingering inside the abandoned mug, they had missed whoever used it by only a matter of minutes. Nathan descended first. The steel ladder groaned beneath his weight, echoing through the chamber below. Every rung carried him farther away from the ordinary world above. By the time his boots touched the concrete floor, the sounds of Black Hollow had vanished completely. No wind, no rain, no traffic, only silence. Not the silence of abandonment, the silence of a room waiting for its owner to return. Elena joined him moments later, followed by Marcus and 2 forensic technicians. The chamber was immaculate. Dust covered almost nothing. The concrete floor had been swept recently. Every chair stood perfectly aligned with the table. Pens rested parallel to one another. Filing cabinets were labeled in neat black lettering. Everything suggested routine, discipline, purpose. Nathan approached the coffee mug. The liquid inside had cooled, but a faint aroma still lingered. Fresh enough. He touched the ceramic. Cold, not ice cold. Whoever had been here had likely left within the last several hours. Across the room, Elena opened a notebook lying beside the mug. The first page was blank. The second, blank. The third, blank. She frowned. There's nothing here. Marcus lifted the notebook toward the overhead light. Indentations. Someone had written on the pages above before tearing them away. Forensic lighting revealed shallow impressions pressed into the paper. Words slowly emerged. Observation, cycle 742, complete. Below that, another line. Transition approved. Nathan stared at the page. Cycle. Transition. Those words appeared nowhere in the journals recovered from the archive. This room served a different purpose. Not observation. Administration. Someone here coordinated the observers. One wall contained dozens of frame maps. Not roads. Not property boundaries. Colored lines flowed across Black Hollow like rivers, tracing where residents walked each day. School routes, delivery schedules, morning jogs, garbage collection, church attendance. The town had been studied with terrifying precision. Marcus noticed small color pins inserted into the maps. Blue, yellow, red. What do they mean? Nathan checked the legend. Blue represented stable routines. Yellow indicated recent changes. Red. His voice became almost a whisper. Unpredictable. Only 7 red pins appeared across the entire town. Nathan read the names attached to them. Mrs. Donnelly, Claire Holloway, Jason Miller. For other missing residents. Every disappearance had begun with a red marker. Whoever ran this observatory noticed behavioral changes before anyone vanished. The implication was horrifying. The observers weren't choosing victims randomly. They were monitoring people who had somehow broken predictable patterns. Elena opened another filing cabinet. Inside were hundreds of identical folders. Each contained the name of a current resident. Teachers, mechanics, doctors, students, children, everyone. Nathan randomly selected one. A teenage grocery clerk. The folder documented 5 years of ordinary life. Departure for school. Arrival home. Weekend activities. Friends. Favorite walking routes. Nothing deeply personal. Just relentless observation. Another folder. A retired carpenter. Same structure. Another. A nurse. Another. A delivery driver. Black Hollow hadn't merely been watched. It had been cataloged. The realization settled over everyone at once. No one in town had escaped observation. Not even the investigators. Nathan searched the cabinet again. There it was. Graves Nathan. His own file. He opened it carefully. The earliest entry dated back 22 years. Nathan was 14. The notes were disturbingly ordinary. Walks home alone after school. Frequently visits library. Excellent memory. Displays curiosity. Page after page followed him through high school. Police academy. First assignment. Promotion. Transfer back to Black Hollow. Someone had watched his entire life. Not constantly. Methodically. Every few months. Every year. Always enough to know where he was. What he was becoming. Tucked inside the back cover rested a recent photograph. Nathan standing outside headquarters 3 days earlier. He slowly lowered the picture. Someone had photographed him after the investigation began. The observers had never stopped. Marcus quietly looked up from another folder. They have one on me, too. Elena held hers without speaking. The room suddenly felt much smaller, much less abandoned. Nathan looked around instinctively. Hidden cameras. Microphones. There had to be something. Forensic technicians swept the observatory with electronic detectors. Nothing. No transmitters. No active surveillance devices. If someone was watching, they weren't doing it from inside this room. Then one technician called out, "Detective." Nathan hurried over. The technician pointed toward a narrow wooden cabinet hidden behind the maps. Unlike everything else, it had no lock. Nathan opened it. Inside rested only one object, A brass mechanical metronome. Old, beautifully crafted. Its pendulum was still moving. Tick, tick, tick. Marcus frowned. That's impossible. The mechanism required manual winding. Nathan touched the polished wood. Warm. Someone had wound it recently. Very recently. Every eye followed the steady rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. Elena noticed a tiny brass plate attached beneath the base. She bent closer. A sentence had been engraved into the metal. When the rhythm stops, begin again. The ticking echoed through the room. No one spoke. Nathan slowly reached toward the pendulum. He hesitated. Something about the room suggested every object had a purpose. Every movement mattered. Still, he gently stopped the pendulum with one finger. Silence. Absolute silence. For exactly 3 seconds. Then every computer monitor in the observatory turned on simultaneously. One after another. Black screens. White letters. No operating system. No logos. Just a single line repeated across every display. Welcome, Detective Graves. The lights above flickered once. Twice. A low mechanical hum spread through the walls. Somewhere beyond the observatory, deep beneath Black Hollow, heavy machinery that had been dormant for decades slowly came to life. Marcus looked toward the sealed doorway on the opposite side of the room. A faint vibration traveled through the floor. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Then, from somewhere far below them, a bell rang. Once. Its echo rolled through the underground passages like distant thunder. Then came a second bell. Then a third. Nathan understood immediately. The observatory hadn't been abandoned. It had been asleep. And by stopping the metronome, they had awakened something that generations of observers had worked very carefully to keep dormant. The third bell faded into darkness. Then everything stopped. The monitors went black. The vibration beneath the floor disappeared as suddenly as it had begun. The observatory stood silent once more, as though nothing had happened. Nathan slowly released his grip on the metronome. No one moved. Marcus was the first to speak. What did we just activate? Nathan looked around the room. I don't think we activated it. He pointed toward the dark monitors. I think someone was waiting for us to stop the metronome. The realization settled over everyone. This place had never been abandoned. It had been designed to respond, not automatically, to people. Elena carefully photographed every monitor before examining the cables running beneath the desks. They led into the wall, not to computers, not to a network, just empty conduits disappearing into solid concrete. The machines themselves contained no hard drives, no processors, only screens. Their terminals, Marcus said quietly. For what? Nathan didn't answer. His attention had shifted to the far end of the room. A clock hung above the sealed doorway. Unlike every other clock they had found, this one wasn't frozen. Its second hand moved steadily. Tick, tick, tick. Then it stopped, exactly at 7:14. A sharp metallic click echoed behind the wall. The sealed door unlocked by itself. Cold air drifted through the widening gap. Beyond it stretched a narrow hallway lined with shelves. No photographs, no yernos, just dozens of identical wooden boxes. Each bore a brass nameplate, not names, dates, 1988, 1989, 1990, 1991, 1992, 1993, 1994. Nathan approached the nearest box. The lid lifted without resistance. Inside rested a cassette recorder, a folded map, a leather notebook, and a sealed envelope. Every other box contained the same 4 objects, prepared, waiting, as if each had been assembled for someone who never returned. Elena unfolded the map from the 1988 box. It showed Black Hollow exactly as it had existed 38 years earlier. Several locations had been circled in red. One of them was Claire Holloway's route home. Another was the old library. The final circle surrounded Miller Bridge. Nathan compared it to the modern map. The locations form a triangle. Its center pointed toward a place no longer shown on current records. An old train depot demolished decades ago. Marcus looked up. That's where we go next. Nathan nodded. For the first time since entering the tunnels, he felt they weren't following random clues anymore. Someone had left a trail, not to confuse them, to lead them. The only question that remained was whether it led toward the truth, or straight into another carefully prepared trap. Night settled over Black Hollow before the team reached the abandoned rail depot. The station no longer appeared on modern maps. Nature had reclaimed almost everything. Rusted tracks disappeared beneath tall grass. The platform had collapsed decades earlier. Only fragments of brick walls and a weathered steel water tower hinted that trains had once stopped here. Nathan compared the faded map from a 1988 box with the terrain. The center should be here. He stopped beside a cracked concrete loading dock. Nothing. No hatch. No doorway. No symbol. Marcus swept the area with a portable ground scanner. The display remained flat. Then, 3 feet farther east, a narrow rectangle appeared beneath the surface. Not a room, a compartment. They cleared away dirt and broken concrete until the edge of a steel lid emerged. Unlike every previous discovery, this one wasn't locked. Nathan lifted it carefully. Inside rested a waterproof military-style case. The foam lining held only 3 items: a cassette tape, a brass key, a typewritten letter. Nathan unfolded the letter first. If you are reading this, you have ignored every warning. Good. Curiosity is the only reason the truth survives. Everything you have found was intended to be discovered eventually, not all at once, not by accident, one piece at a time. Do not waste time searching for the observer. There has never been only one. There has never been only one truth. Find the first ledger. It was never placed in the archive. It was hidden where the town buried its beginnings. The page ended without a signature. Elena looked toward Nathan. The first ledger. We've never found it. Marcus turned the brass key over in his hand. A tiny number had been stamped into its side. 12. No symbol, he said. Just a number. Nathan studied the map again. 12. His eyes drifted toward an old survey legend printed in one corner. Historic parcels. Each original property carried a number. Parcel 12 sat beneath the oldest structure still standing in Black Hollow, St. Alden's Chapel, the abandoned stone church overlooking the cemetery. The chapel, Nathan said quietly. Before anyone could respond, Elena slid the cassette into a portable recorder. Static filled the night. A man's calm voice emerged. If this recording has reached you, then the investigation has advanced farther than expected. The voice paused. You have probably concluded that generations of observers control this town. Another pause. That conclusion is wrong. Nathan exchanged a quick glance with Elena. The records were created by investigators. Silence. Not rulers. Not guardians. Investigators. The tape crackled. Each generation inherited unanswered questions from the last. Each believed they would be the one to solve them. Each left their work behind when they failed. The recording ended abruptly with a loud click. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Everything they had assumed shifted at once. The journals, the maps, the surveillance notes. Perhaps they were never the records of a hidden organization controlling Black Hollow. Perhaps they were decades of investigators, ordinary people. Try to solve the same mystery, each adding another layer before disappearing, retiring, or giving up. Nathan looked toward the distant silhouette of St. Alden's Chapel rising above the trees. If that's true, Elena finished the thought. Then the first ledger isn't the end of the story. It's a beginning. Thunder rolled across the valley once again. Nathan closed the steel case and looked toward the hill where the abandoned chapel stood against the dark sky. For the first time since reopening the investigation, he felt they were no longer chasing shadows left by unseen enemies. They were following the footsteps of those who had come before. And somewhere beneath the chapel, if the recording was telling the truth, the very first investigator had left behind the one journal that no one else had ever found. The climb to St. Alden's Chapel began before sunrise. Fog drifted across the hillside, wrapping the old stone building in a pale gray veil. The chapel had stood above Black Hollow for more than a century, surviving storms, fires, and decades of neglect. Its bell had not rung in almost 40 years. Ivy climbed the cracked walls, weaving through shattered stained glass windows that glowed faintly as dawn approached. Nathan stopped at the rusted iron gate. Something felt wrong. The chain securing the entrance lay on the ground, freshly cut. Marcus knelt beside it, less than a day old. Someone else had entered before them. The team spread out, moving carefully through the silent cemetery. Fallen leaves muffled every footstep. Most headstones leaned at odd angles, their inscriptions softened by rain and time. Inside the chapel, rows of wooden pews faced a simple stone altar. Dust covered almost everything. Almost. A narrow trail crossed the center aisle. Recent footprints. Only one person. Nathan followed them to the altar. Behind it stood an old oak lectern, carved with the same three-line symbol they had seen throughout the investigation. He pushed gently. Nothing happened. Marcus examined the base. There's a hinge. Together, they shifted the heavy lectern sideways. A square opening appeared beneath it. Stone steps descended into darkness. Unlike the tunnels beneath the town, these stairs were dry, almost untouched. Nathan switched on his flashlight and started down. The chamber below was small, circular, no larger than a library reading room. Shelves carved directly into stone held dozens of leather-bound books, their spines worn but carefully arranged. At the center stood a single wooden desk. Upon it rested an oil lamp, unlit. Beside the lamp lay a journal wrapped in faded brown cloth. Nothing else. Nathan approached slowly. Across the cover, embossed in cracked gold lettering, were 4 simple words. The first ledger. He carefully unfolded the cloth. The leather creaked softly as he opened the journal. The first page contained no mystery, no code, only a handwritten sentence. If you have reached this room, then you deserve the truth, not because you solved the mystery, but because you refused to stop asking questions. Nathan turned the page. The entries began in 1932, not as reports, not as surveillance logs, as a diary. The author introduced himself only once. My name is Samuel Ashcroft. I was appointed town surveyor after the spring floods. During the repairs, I discovered passages beneath Black Hollow that did not appear on any official plans. Nathan read silently as the story unfolded. Ashcroft described hidden rooms built by unknown laborers decades earlier. He described finding abandoned notebooks left by someone before him. He described making the same mistake every investigator would repeat, believing the next clue would finally explain everything. Instead, every answer revealed another unanswered question. Near the middle of the ledger, one passage had been underlined twice. The danger is not in the tunnels. The danger is believing there is only one mystery. Nathan looked up. The room suddenly felt much larger than before. Elena quietly read over his shoulder. So every generation inherited the investigation. Nathan nodded and added to it. Marcus searched the shelves. Each journal belonged to a different decade, different handwriting, different authors, school teachers, surveyors, sheriffs, engineers, librarians, ordinary residents. Each had uncovered a fragment. Each had left their findings for whoever came next. No secret society. No immortal observer. Just generations of people determined to understand why strange things kept happening in Black Hollow. Nathan smiled faintly for the first time in days. The observers. That were us. Elena finished softly. People who chose to keep looking when everyone else had stopped. A sudden noise echoed from above. A door slammed. Then hurried footsteps crossed the chapel floor. The team rushed toward the staircase. By the time they reached the sanctuary, the front door stood wide open. Whoever had entered was already gone. Only a single object remained on the first pew, a modern notebook. Its cover was clean, unused. Nathan opened it. The first page contained one line written in fresh black ink. Your chapter begins here. He closed the notebook slowly. Outside, morning sunlight finally broke through the clouds, illuminating Black Hollow below. The town looked peaceful. Children walked to school. Shopkeepers unlocked their doors. Life continued as it always had. Nathan understood something the previous investigators eventually had as well. Some mysteries were solved by finding answers. Others survived because every answer opened a deeper question. He slipped the empty notebook into his bag. One investigation had reached its end. Another had just begun.